Chapter 278. However, his eyes were blurry after all, so he couldn't hold her hand properly. He only managed to grab her wrist. In that instant, Ningshu's breathing became chaotic. The place he was holding was burning hot, and it flowed along her blood vessels to her heart. She sensed that Xiaoqing's slightly cold palm was quickly moving in the direction of her finger. Ningshu hurriedly came back to her senses and withdrew her fourth finger. After confirming that she was indeed making a vow, Xiaoqing dispelled his suspicions about her. However, there was a sudden silence in the carriage. It was as if time had been frozen at this moment, falling into some kind of obscure state. No one moved, no one spoke. Only the sound of each person's breathing intertwined with each other. Until Xiaoqing suddenly reacted. He let go of her hand and said to Jiu Siling, who was outside the carriage curtain, "Go to the medical center." Ningshu also came back to her senses and said, "It's really just a very small wound. There's really no need to make such a big fuss. Perhaps it will heal before we reach the medical center. Other patients will definitely laugh at me if they see it." "Shut up." Xiaoqing directly threw these two words at her, successfully sealing her mouth. Ningshu looked at him sullenly, then turned her gaze to outside the carriage window. The carriage left the chasing cloud and chasing moon building and slowly drove along the Chaobai River in the direction of the medical center. Along the way, the cheerful sound of the Chaobai River flowed side by side. She quietly pinched the fingertips that he had just counted one by one. Suddenly, she felt that the weather outside wasn't very hot. There was also a small gust of cool wind entering the carriage window. She couldn't help but curl the corners of her mouth into a shallow arc. The early summer plum ripened early. The first bite was indescribably sour, but after tasting it, even though you knew it was sour, you still couldn't help but want to take a second bite. Because after the sourness, there was always a long sweet aftertaste. It was too wonderful for words. After a cool breeze, Ningshu gently opened her mouth. Her voice was as soft as the most delicate pattern embroidered by an embroiderer in shoe embroidery. "Next time something similar happens, I won't act rashly. I'll definitely discuss it with Your Highness in advance, and make the most careful plans. However, I also hope that Your Highness can be honest with me. This way, we won't have any misunderstandings and won't waste so much effort and time." Xiaoqing's expression seemed to change slightly, like a wisp of cloud flying across the vast sky, light and soft to the point of almost being transparent. He slowly said, "Okay." Ningshu lowered her eyes and smiled silently. Then she said, "That's right, I took that thing from the princess. It's a sleeping gown embroidered with plum blossoms." Xiaoqing's carriage was naturally one of the safest places in the world. After spending so much effort to obtain this sleeping gown, she finally had the time to take it out and examine it carefully. She saw that on the snow-white satin that was as soft as a young girl's skin, there were over 100 red plum blossoms that looked exactly the same. It should have been the most festive color, but with this kind of dense pile of plum blossoms and the special meaning of this design, looking at it from afar, it gave off the feeling of looking at a blood rain. Ningshu's eyes carefully passed over each plum blossom, not wanting to miss a single one. Suddenly, she stopped on one of them and lowered her head to smell it. "On this plum blossom, I seem to smell a bit of rust." She moved the plum blossom to a window where the light was better, and found that the embroidery on this plum blossom was darker than the others. It was faintly black, like it was mixed with blood. Chapter 279. After sniffing and inspecting it carefully, Ningshu confirmed that the plum blossom was embroidered with threads dyed with blood. A blood-stained plum blossom. What does old consort you want to tell us through it? Putting down the nightgown in her hands, Ningshu fell into deep thought. Every scene related to old consort you flashed through her mind like a book. She suddenly said, "I remember when I examined old consort Yu's body, I found a wound on her right index finger. It seemed like she bit it herself. Could it be related to this? But what does this drop of blood have to do with the kiss of the plum blossom? Or is there something else mixed in this drop of blood that I can't identify? If only Huimo was here, he might be able to find a way to test it." Ningshu missed Huimo's use very much. Seeming a little tired, Xiaoqing leaned against the cushion and said casually, The Ministry of Justice has sent a message that the palace has stopped the punishment of 20 strokes of the cane a day. I believe that you will be released soon. That's great, we're finally going to pass this trial. Hearing this, Ningxu let out a long sigh of relief. She thought to herself, Guillermo suffered for me this time. When he comes back, I must make it up to him twice as much. In the Ministry of Justice's prison, Guillermo, who had gained 2 caddies of weight in prison, took advantage of the fact that no one was around to sit with his legs crossed and enjoy the delicacies that Tan Siwei had someone bring in. Suddenly he sneezed loudly. He rubbed his nose and muttered in surprise, Who's thinking of me? Is it Shi Ziyi, Lady Ning? Or little Forsythia? Hee, I'm really charming. Then he continued to flip through the novel that he had tricked from Tan Siwei, and read with great interest. The carriage continued to move leisurely along the Chaobai River. Thinking that it wouldn't be too late to examine it after Huiyemo came out, Ningxu temporarily put away the blood-soaked nightgown and said, Other than this nightgown, I also heard from Princess Chongping that the night before the Xianqing Monastery incident, old Princess Consort you specially went to her palace to accompany her for a night, and even sang her a nursery rhyme when she was young. Hearing this sensitive time, Xia Hoqing's expression changed slightly. Which song? The Swallowpecks at the Imperial Grandson. It's a well-known poem by the common people of the Han dynasty. Zhao Fian and her younger sister Zhao Heda persecuted the princes, causing Emperor Cheng of Han to have no descendants. Xia Hoqing slowly rubbed the pale finger bone in his palm, and let out a meaningful chuckle. This song is interesting. Ningxu nodded silently. That's right. The common people only know about the legends. They think that Emperor Cheng of Han had no descendants because Zhao Fian and her sister were cruel and merciless and killed all his children. But I heard another saying in many ancient books. The reason why Emperor Cheng of Han had no descendants was actually because the Lu family's bloodline was flawed. The successive emperors married their relatives. For example, Emperor Jing of Han married his cousin Lady Bo. Emperor Wu of Han married his cousin Jiao, causing many of his descendants to be crazy. In the end, Emperor Zhao of Han had no descendants, Emperor Xian of Han had 5, and Emperor Yuan of Han had 3. After that, Emperor Cheng, Emperor Ai, and Emperor Ping of Han all had no descendants. The story of the Swallowpecks at the Imperial Grandson was just a fabricated story for the harem. Old Princess Consort, you purposely sang this nursery rhyme. Could it be that this story is referring to the current dynasty? Xia Hoqing bent his knuckles and lightly knocked on the small table twice. There are a total of 2 cases in the current dynasty that are related to the imperial family, and have affected the entire political situation of the imperial court. Ningxu reacted quickly and immediately continued. In the 4th year of Heaven's selection, the eldest son and second son of the emperor fought for the throne. And, 25 years ago, Empress Zhou went crazy and killed the previous crown prince. Her blood dyed the Phoenix Algae Palace and she set fire to Phoenix Terrace. When the last word came out of her mouth, Ningxu's entire body started to tremble uncontrollably. In the 2 cases, no matter which one old Princess Consort you was referring to, it meant that the secret and truth they were investigating would be swept into an even bigger and unexplainable flood. Who could guarantee that they would be able to escape unscathed after being swept into this huge wave? Ningxu revealed a pale smile. The answer was, no one could. She reached out to take a sip of tea to calm herself down. However, the more she tried to do so, the more flustered she became. She accidentally knocked over the teacup and spilled it on his clothes. Your Highness, I'm sorry. Ningxu hurriedly pulled out a handkerchief and hurriedly helped him wipe it off. A jade-colored hand slowly reached over and gently patted the back of her flustered hand. The owner of that hand lowered his voice and said in a seemingly calm voice, Don't worry, the sky won't fall before I die. Even if I die and the sky falls, it won't hurt you. I'm here. Ningxu was stunned. In the carriage, she bent over him, her hand still on his lapel, and he sat upright on the couch, looking up at her. Her skin was as white as snow and his hair was as black as ink. Everything seemed to have returned to 2 months ago, to the early morning when they had made an alliance with each other. The only difference was that their positions had been switched. The carriage continued to move forward along the wide road beside Chaobai River. They inadvertently passed by a small alley where 7 or 8 children were happily singing nursery rhymes they had learned from their elders. Yin yin, wei shirgu, zhang gongzi, time to meet. Wooden dort song langjian, swallow flies, pecks the imperial grandson. Imperial grandson dies, swallow pecks the arrow. After they finished singing, the children clapped their hands happily, and then chased each other into the depths of the alley, leaving behind a string of bell-like laughter. Inside the carriage, Ningshu's eyes curved into a smile, her eyes as bright as the moon. All right, I'm not afraid. Chapter 280. In front of her was a large field of red spider lilies. She stepped barefoot on this beautiful and almost demonic flower field. Bright and beautiful light spots like fireflies slowly floated up from under her feet and surrounded her. Those were the soul fragments from the abyss of hell. She reached out and grabbed one of the light spots, then slowly opened it. She heard the miserable screams and cries from the light spot, whistling towards her and finally completely disappearing. Suddenly, there was a loud sound that shocked the soul, and a palace rose from the ground. In the palace, the huge shadow of King Yama appeared. He had a green face and fangs, and his eyes were wide open in anger. He pointed at the tiny Ningshu under his feet, and immediately, a cluster of netherworldly fire burned up from the ground of hell, engulfing her whole body. Her body was being incinerated by the Li fire. Her snow-white skin melted like paper, and her bright red flesh turned into charcoal. She screamed silently in the Li fire, and endured until her entire body was burned into a pile of white bones. She turned into powder, and fell into the dazzlingly beautiful scarlet flowers. But the punishment was not over. Her broken body was rebuilt from nothingness, and her flesh and skin were pieced back together. She continued to endure the burning of the fire, and so on. In the endless pain, King Yama's bell-like voice invaded her soul, and it was deafening. Because of your brother's life, you turned against Emperor Yan, Xiao Yuni, and caused millions of people to die. The common people were in a terrible situation, and blood flowed like a river. Ningshu, do you know your wrongs? Surrounded by the fire, she had nowhere to escape. Her body was emitting a strong burnt smell, and even her soul was trembling. She gritted her teeth and said with difficulty, I didn't know. Xiao Yuni killed my brother, causing him to die an unnatural death. If I don't take revenge, I, Ningshu, am unworthy of being a person. Ningji was instigated to kill Empress Fei Luan first. She deserves this. If we talk about the reason, it was also Xiao Yuni who went against his oath. My brother Ji, only felt injustice for me. What wrong did he do? King Yanluo shook his head and sighed. Revenge breeds revenge. When will there ever be an end to it? Don't be obsessed with it. I'll give you one more chance. Ningshu, do you know your wrongs? Ningshu's upper body was half bone. Her lips were burnt black and full of blood. She screamed in endless pain. I don't know. I, Ningshu, will never admit my mistakes. How stubborn. The phantom of King Yanluo suddenly expanded and angrily pointed at Ningshu. The mandate book in his hand flipped like waves. You were blinded by love. You were greedy because of love. You were angry because you couldn't get what you wanted. You were disgusted because of separation. You were guilty of the 3 sins of greed, anger, and blindness. I betrayed you in accordance with the law for 3,000 years in the Blade Mountain prison, and 3,000 years in the Blazing Inferno prison. Men, carry out the punishment. The ground beneath her feet collapsed like sand, revealing a sea of fire that was tens of thousands of times larger than the Li fire of the netherworld. In the sea of fire, thousands of ghosts were howling in pain at the bottom of the abyss, reaching out their scorched black claws to her. And among the thousands of ghosts, 274 of them were particularly familiar. They were her deceased parents and relatives, including her little brother, Ji, or she immediately froze as if she had turned into ashes. Even her soul had been shattered. They were supposed to enter the cycle of reincarnation after washing away their sins, and be reborn as humans. But because of you, they are also suffering the pain of being burned by the fire. Ningshu, do you still want to continue being stubborn because of love? The phantom of King Yanluo behind her gradually turned into a thick black shadow, and then transformed into Xiao Yuni's appearance. He questioned her again and again behind her. Ningshu, Do you still want to implicate your family and cause them to never be reincarnated because of love? Ningshu, do you still want to be obsessed with greed, anger, and blindness? Do you still not let go of resentment and hate? Do you still want to watch them beg for death in the fire? She covered the only heart that was left behind the charred skeleton. She reached out to the fire, kneeling on the ground and crying, "No, no, no." Chapter 281. I admit my mistake. The person in the black fog continued to let out a cold, mechanical laugh and said in her ear, "Don't repeat the same mistake. Otherwise everyone will still die, including Xiaoqing." The scene around her instantly disappeared and turned into a chaotic black fog that wrapped around her. Ningshu suddenly opened her eyes. She clutched her heart that was in extreme pain and desperately gasped for breath. Her eyes looked in the direction of the roof, and her gaze fell into the void. Her entire body was ice cold, and even her sleeping clothes were soaked in cold sweat. Her limbs seemed to be infected by the pain of digging out her bones and chiseling her marrow in her dream, and slightly trembled. She got up with difficulty and scooped a handful of cold water from the copper basin and splashed it on her face. Only then did she completely separate herself from the nightmare from several hundred years ago and wake up. She looked at the illusory reflection in the copper basin and let out a self-deprecating laugh. "Look at you, an old ghost of several hundred years. You clearly knew that the dream was a dream, yet you were still scared to this extent. You're so stupid." If Mengpa, who fetched soup on the bridge of helplessness, knew about this, she would definitely laugh at her for another 300 years. After laughing, she slowly calmed down and silently calculated in her heart. There were still 4 months left until she turned 17. There was 1 day left until the bitter pain in her blood was also the same time limit. After 4 months, if she still couldn't solve all the mysteries, then everything would repeat the mistakes of her first life. However, her true opponent was still hidden in the fog. She didn't know what kind of mask they were wearing, and she didn't even know who was behind the mask. She didn't even know if they were male or female, old or young. Did she really have the ability to change all of this? King Chujiang, King Chujiang, it's rare for you to go against the heavens and change my fate to obtain this chance to live again. If I let you down, then what should I do? Bang, bang, bang. The familiar knocking on the door sounded again and interrupted her wild thoughts. Feng Mama's methodical voice sounded as usual. "Imperial bodyguard Ning, get up. His Highness the heir is waiting to serve you in the unknown hall. It's best if you hurry up and don't let the master wait too long." For the first time, Ningshu felt that Nanny Feng's voice was so pleasant and full of vitality. It pulled her back from the hopeless hell and back to the present world, full of vitality. Her heavy heart calmed down a lot. She quickly wiped her face and stood up. She changed back into the bodyguard uniform that Xiaoqing had specially made for her. She opened the door and walked out with a smile. "Okay, Feng Mama, this subordinate will go now." Walking along the winding flower corridors of the Prince of Namping's residence, the green leaves on both sides still had morning dew. Round droplets dripped down along the veins of the leaves and landed on another leaf. After bouncing a few times, they slid down the branches and into the soil. The white clouds in the sky were soft, and not far away, the crabapple fruit was quietly condensing. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath of the refreshing morning air. At the end of the flower corridor and the unknown hall, the familiar ink-colored figure stood under the eaves, reaching out to caress the coquettish aureole in his palm. Looking at that figure, Ningshu's footsteps hesitated. The cold voice in her dream sounded again in her mind, making her feel apprehensive, making her hesitate, making her unable to not hesitate. But Xiaoqing under the eaves seemed to hear her footsteps. He turned his face, letting go of the aureole in his palm, and silently waved at her. A gentle breeze blew away the condensed clouds, and she heard the clear cries of the orioles. Ningshu looked at the hand that was beckoning her not far away. One lonely wing found another, and her fluctuating heart finally had a breather. She quickened her steps to meet him. In order to live up to King Chujiang's good intentions, and to not let Mengpa laugh at her, she could only work hard to live a long life, along with her family and Xiaoqing. Unless she turned into ashes, she would not allow a second ending. Chapter 282. The capital was located at the heart of the entire country, and it was the most prosperous place in the Great U. After 300 years of sedimentation, it gradually formed the four major characteristics of buying horses in the north, tea in the south, wine and food in the east, and smile in the west. The last word, smile, naturally referred to the sweet smiles of the women in the street. The Dragon Boat Festival had just passed, and the east was more lively than usual. In order to attract more customers, the merchants along the river were resourceful, and the dragon boat race on the Chaobai River would be held until the end of the month. Sure enough, there was an endless stream of tourists, crowding both sides of the river. Looking at the turning oars in the water and the competing bows of the boats, they clapped and cheered. The vendors along the river also made a lot of money, smiling so widely that their eyes could not be seen. Now was the most popular season for selling dumplings at the food stalls. The snow-white glutinous rice was soaked in mountain spring water 2 hours in advance, and the grains were soaked until they were white and plump and full. Then with the rich stuffing they were wrapped in green bamboo leaves, and a dazzling silk thread had been firmly tied into a triangle. The boiling water in the big pot could not wait any longer, and with dozens of splashing sounds, the pot was full. At this time, one must not be careless, and one must keep one's eyes firmly fixed on the heat. When the time came, one must immediately lift the pot. The fragrance of the bamboo leaves, the fragrance of the glutinous rice, and the stuffing together overflowed half of the street, making one's mouth water. If one liked sweet, one would buy sweet date dumplings, and if one liked salty, one would buy dried rice dumplings. The boiling hot dumplings were taken out of the hot soup, and the green bamboo leaves were peeled off layer by layer, and the process of looking forward to the rich stuffing inside was the greatest enjoyment in the world. On Changhua Street, in front of the most famous snack stall, dozens of hands holding copper coins surrounded the stall owner. Ning Shu squeezed out of the crowd with difficulty, holding 2 steaming hot dumplings, and was already sweating profusely. She looked back, and at the end of the surging tide of people was a tall Chinese redbud tree, with lush branches and leaves. Above her head, the brilliant sunlight shuttled back and forth through the gaps between the leaves, sprinkling golden fragments on the body of a young man wearing a frost-colored robe under the tree. He was extremely tall and straight, and the outer layer of his silk robe, painted with an ink pattern of distant mountains and long clouds, fluttered slightly in the wind. He did not need to speak, but he already had a noble and lofty aura, making people unable to help but slow down, wanting to see his true appearance. It was a pity that such a dazzling man was wearing a veiled hat on his head, which completely covered his face, causing the young girls who passed by to feel hatred in their hearts. Of course, this veil hat was worn by Ning Shu, who begged Xia Hoqing to wear it. The reason was, she was in her prime, and did not want to be trampled to death by the embroidered shoes of the tens of thousands of young girls in the market who wanted to see the handsome face of the heir. It seemed that Ning Shu had been waiting impatiently for a long time, and behind the veil hat, Xia Hoqing could not help but wrinkle his eyebrows. It was not until he heard the familiar sound of footsteps coming from afar that he slowly relaxed his eyebrows. Ning Shu's warm voice, like a dumpling, sounded in his ear. "Your Highness, I have already peeled off the bamboo leaves for you. While it is still warm, you should quickly try it. This is the best dumpling maker in the entire capital, and the stuffing is also the best and freshest. I guarantee with my life that it is absolutely delicious." As she spoke, she enthusiastically delivered the peeled dumplings to Xia Hoqing's lips. Xia Hoqing couldn't understand why she had lined up for an hour to flatter him for 2 rice dumplings. "For me, food is just food to fill my stomach. As for the taste, whether it's sour, sweet, bitter, or spicy, it doesn't make any difference whether it's delicious or not." Ning Shu was not dispirited at all. She pinched her sleeve to wipe the sweat from her forehead and said, "Whether it is delicious or not, you may not know it with your mouth, but your heart knows. Especially my daughter. No. This subordinate spent a lot of effort to buy these dumplings. Even if you can't tell with your mouth, your Highness will definitely feel that it is delicious in your heart." Her voice was like a sparrow's chirping, and it was even more lively than the cicadas in the redbud tree above them. Xia Hoqing lightly snorted. Preposterous logic. But in the end he took the dumplings in her hand and put them into his mouth, slowly eating a few bites. How is it? How is it? Does your highness feel the subordinate's good intentions? Ningxu blinked her eyes, expectantly waiting for him to praise her. Xiaoqing indifferently said, "It's only so." Ningxu curled her lips and a handkerchief flew over. Use this to wipe your sweat. Don't always use your sleeve. Aren't you afraid of getting dirty? The owner of the handkerchief coldly said this, then turned around and continued walking. Ningxu took the handkerchief and looked at his tall back. She secretly stuck out her tongue, ridiculing in her heart. Awkwardness is a kind of illness that needs to be treated. But how did he know she was using her sleeve to wipe her sweat? Although this person's eyes were blurry, his heart was full of wisdom. He didn't need to look. Nothing could be hidden from him. Today was the 9th of the 5th month, 8 days away from Princess Chongping's marriage. Wen Huinyang, who had been sent out as bait, suddenly died in her home. The cause of death was a dagger shot from a flying crossbow that pierced her throat. When the Prince of Nanping's personal guards chased after the assassin, they found a token that belonged to the 7th prince's estate. Ningxu had just accompanied Xiaoqing to the scene of the crime, but found nothing. Wen Huinyang's son, Qianbingyi's wails were still ringing in their ears. Ningxu thought for a moment, then dragged Xiaoqing to the nearby eastern market to stroll around and watch the commotion. As she slowly walked behind Xiaoqing, Ningxu bit into the sweet dumplings in her hand. It shouldn't be Xiao Yunsan's doing. Assassins in charge of assassinations wouldn't carry anything that could reveal their identities in order to avoid being exposed. A token like this is too clumsy. Chapter 283. After finishing the dumplings, Xiaoqing seemed to be in a better mood. His voice was less tense. Xiao Yunsan's maternal family is a new noble family from Ji province. His mother entered the palace in the 6th year of Heaven's Choice. Whether it was 25 years ago or the 4th year of Heaven's Choice, it had nothing to do with her. I can't find a reason to implicate him. Ningxu nodded. That dagger is quite interesting. It looks normal, but the handle has a few whorls on it to make it easier to grasp and accurately stab the enemy. It's a new style that the Ministry of War came up with this year. Perhaps we can continue our investigation based on it. In addition, according to the pursuing guards, he cut the assassin's right arm. That's also a breakthrough. Originally, they thought they'd pull out a big fish through Wen Huinyang. They hadn't expected the other side to go all the way and directly silence Wen Huinyang. What did this mean? The other side had already noticed their recent actions and understood their thoughts. Moreover, he wasn't afraid they'd find anything, so he didn't ask Wen Huinyang a single question and directly silenced her. He was using this as a demonstration. Even if you find traces, I'm not afraid, because the deer's neck will always be in my hands. How annoying. For the time being, Ningxu didn't want to think about this depressing matter. She put the last sweet and delicate red date into her mouth. Right. I heard from Princess Chongping that your highness agreed to help her escape the predicament of a political marriage. I'm very curious, how does your highness plan to deal with this matter? Southern Yan had come aggressively, clearly wanting to use the political marriage as an excuse to extort the dowry from the 10 cities. Of all of His Majesty's princesses, the 13th princess was the least favored. In addition, the 13th princess' identity had been exposed in the Xianqing monastery case. Although His Majesty had ordered them to keep their mouths shut, they were sure to have a fishbone stuck in their throat. It wouldn't be easy to convince His Majesty to change the candidate. Thus, Ningxu wanted to know what Xiaoqing was planning. A substitute. Xiaoqing was concise and to the point. As far as I know, the envoys from the Southern Yan Kingdom haven't seen the 13th princess's face yet. They've only seen her portrait. So the simplest way is to directly choose a substitute to marry in her place. Ningxu put down the dumplings in her hands and tilted her head, saying, "This method is good, but this marriage alliance is no small matter. The Southern Yan Kingdom came with wild ambitions. If they find out that the princess is someone else in disguise, I'm afraid they will use this as a pretext to make a fuss and create an even bigger disaster. Moreover, it is said that the envoy from the Southern Yan Empire is not someone easy to deal with." She recalled the situation on the day of old Consort Yu's funeral, and pursed her lips in disgust. Wine, women, wealth, and power were all present. His reputation was extremely bad. He had only been in Great Yu for half a month, but he had already been criticized by many people. Moreover, he was cunning and cunning. Whether it was in Great Yu or Beishuan, his notoriety was widespread. Xia Hoqing unhurriedly said, "Therefore, there is a second step. When the Southern Yan envoys leave Great Yu with the princess's carriage and set foot on Southern Yan's territory, they will encounter an unexpected disaster in the middle of the night. The princess will be burned to death, and not even her bones will be left." This is a wonderful move. Ningxu couldn't help but clap her hands in praise. If the princess is taken away by them and met with danger in another country's territory, it will be the Southern Yan Kingdom's responsibility. At that time, they won't have the face to say anything, let alone mention the marriage alliance. Instead, they will be somewhat in the wrong in front of Great Yu. As for the matter of the dowry of 10 cities, it will also disappear like smoke in thin air. Ningxu thought for a moment and said, "It's just that in this way, Princess Chongping will no longer be able to show her true identity in front of others. She will no longer have a luxurious house or a luxurious life. Perhaps she will even have to conceal her identity and hide. Is she willing to accept such a consequence?" Xia Hoqing's voice was as light as the wind. "I have already explained the consequences to her. She has accepted it, so when the time comes, I will help her create a new identity and help her leave the capital. The rest will be up to her to decide." Ningxu thought of Xiao Chongping's incomprehensible wish, which others couldn't understand, but she could only hope for but not achieve. She nodded in understanding. Leaving the imperial palace, leaving the identity of a princess, for her, it might be simpler and happier. I hope she will be able to fulfill her wish. As the two were whispering to each other, Xia Hoqing's ears twitched. He suddenly said, "Be careful." He reached out and grabbed her arm, pulling her in his direction. In the next instant, a figure rushed out from the alley they had just passed, almost knocking Ningxu to the ground. Jiuxi hurriedly stepped forward to stop the figure that had suddenly appeared. With a glance, she saw that it was a 16 or 17-year-old budding young girl. The young girl wore a plain cloth dress and her hands were covered in blood. Holding a pair of scissors, she shouted behind her, "Don't come over. Let me die." Chapter 284. At this time, the sun was shining brightly. It was the busiest time of the day. The people went out to work, wash, and do small business. When they heard the movement at the entrance of the alley, they immediately surrounded them like flies smelling blood. "Isn't this Li San'er's daughter? Oh my, she's taking things too hard again. How pitiful. After such a thing, her innocence is gone. How can she pretend that it didn't happen? Did you hear that when the Sun family found by the river that morning, her clothes were in a mess, her undergarment was far away, and she fainted? That situation was a big blow to an unmarried girl's family. I really don't know who did such a thing. I hope God will open his eyes and punish that evil person quickly. What's the use of being struck by lightning? If you lose your reputation, then so be it. Look, the Zhou family came this morning to cancel the marriage. I guess she won't be able to get married in the future. Who can be blamed for this? Li San, or can only blame himself for being greedy for money. All day long, he asked a virgin to sell flowers to make money in public. Otherwise, he wouldn't have encountered such a thing. Don't talk about it. Last month, a girl in Pingning Square also had such a thing. At night, when everyone was asleep, she crawled into the well and drowned. Hearing the discussion of the neighbors, the girl called Er's face became paler. More tears gushed out from her pair of hopeless eyes. She struggled to break free from Jiuxi's hand and bent down to beg as if she couldn't bear it. "Please don't talk about it. I really didn't. I'm innocent. You all believe me." But the more she acted like this, the more those who were watching the fun, chatting, teasing, unintentional, and malicious eyes surrounded her from all directions. They were like knives, cutting off her flesh piece by piece. There were a few sloppy gangsters in the crowd. While throwing melon seed shells, they mocked, "Li San'er is an ugly cripple. It's rare for him to raise such a beautiful daughter. He's just ruining her body for no reason. Now she has become a withered flower." Tsk, what a pity, what a pity. She should have agreed with me. That's right. Who asked her to look down on our boss? Now she has suffered retribution. She deserves it. Now kneeling down and begging a man to marry you is just wishful thinking. Ha. The words of those ruffians and scoundrels were extremely ear-piercing. The last bit of color on Ear's face faded away. Other than the tears on her face, she looked as if she was dead. Many people frowned in disgust and moved away, but no one dared to stop them. Behind the crowd, a clean and gentle voice said, Buddha said, those who sow discord, spread false rumors, slander, and glib tongues should be put in the steamer prison after death. They would be cooked alive in the steamer. After being steamed, a cold wind would blow and reconstruct their bodies. Then they would be sent to the tongue-pulling prison. The little ghost in prison pried open the person's mouth, clamped the tongue with a pair of iron pliers, and pulled it out. It was not pulled out in one go, but stretched it out and slowly pulled it out. This process repeated until all the sins of the person were eliminated. Which one of you has the guts to scare me? Courting death. It turned out to be a skinny kid. He looked delicate and pretty, and his chin was as sharp as a girl's. What's the matter? Do you want to spar with me? Ouch. Those ruffians pushed through the crowd and wanted to find Ning Shu to settle the score. Suddenly, they felt a sharp pain in their bodies and fell to the ground. Damn it, When the ruffians saw that it was actually gold that hit them, they immediately fell back to the ground. Boss, it's gold. Quickly pick it up. The leader of the ruffians slapped them on the head. Pick up your mother's head. Quickly go. If they could use gold to hit people, they would be courting death if they didn't run away. Looking at these people who ran away with their tails between their legs, Ning Shu sneered in disdain. She whispered to the man who had been calm from the beginning to the end, I've troubled your highness to lend a helping hand and generously donate money again. Don't worry, this will be added to your account together with the medical expenses. Heh. Your highness is really clear about public and private matters. Should we also include the interest? Good idea. You reminded me. Then, according to the market's 30% interest rate. While she was arguing with Xiaoqing, Ning Shu glanced out of the corner of her eye and saw Ear's Adam's apple rolling. Ear's footsteps faltered. Er hardened her heart and suddenly raised her hand to stab her own heart. Don't. There was no second thought in her heart. Ning Shu subconsciously rushed forward and grabbed the scissors. Because she used too much strength, the scissors pierced deeply into her palm. Thick blood dripped down the scissors to the ground. Chapter 285. Ear was shocked and stunned. The scissors had been snatched away by Ning Shu. A woman in coarse linen rushed over and hugged Er, who was in despair. She cried, Ear, don't take it too hard. I'm begging you. Ear was trembling all over. She curled herself into a ball with her back facing everyone. She slowly bent her knees and slid down to kneel on the ground. Mother, let me die. I can't live like this anymore. The woman's dry lips moved. I'm useless. I couldn't protect you. But I only have one daughter. If you seek death, I can't live anymore. Why don't I die with you? Let's end this once and for all. As they spoke, the two of them stood up and ran towards the direction of Chaobai River. Fortunately, the neighbors stopped them and did not let them jump into the river together. Being held back by the neighbors' aunts, Ear's heart was as dead as ashes. Only her tears were still flowing. She kept murmuring, Please let me die. I'm begging you. A few soft-hearted women followed her and wiped their tears, shouting that they had sinned. Looking at this scene, Ning Shu threw the scissors in her hand on the ground. She walked to Er and asked calmly, Do you think it's your fault? If you think so, then you can jump into the river. I'll block it for you. I guarantee that no one will stop you. Er's closed eyes trembled. She did not say anything. Ning Shu said faintly, It seems that you think so. Then please step aside. Even if she doesn't die today, she will die tomorrow. Instead of letting her suffer, it's better to fulfill her wish earlier. She spoke so heartlessly that she was met with many women's cold frowns. Just as Ning Shu was indifferently dispersing the crowd for her, Er finally opened her mouth slowly and said in a mosquito-like voice, No, it's not my fault. It's not. She took a deep breath, clutched her chest, and cried out. That evening, I was selling flowers in Shui City as usual. When I was about to return home, Miss Susu from Sun Fengtai sent someone to ask if there were any jade hairpin flowers. If there were, send them all to her. She needed them urgently. I thought that the flower had medicine, so Miss Susu must have been sick, so I went there. I knew it wasn't a proper place, so I walked very fast on the way back. I didn't expect that when I was about to leave the alley, someone bumped into me. I didn't know him. I picked up the basket and was about to leave, but I ran as fast as I could and almost ran away, but it was too dark and I accidentally stepped on a pebble and fainted. But I'm innocent. It's not my fault, it's really not. The ice on Ningxu's face finally melted. He squatted down and gently wiped away the tears on her face with his left hand. Yes, you're right. It's really not your fault. It's someone else who did evil. He should be the one who should die and go to hell. Why do you want to end your life so easily because of this? If the other party knows that you committed suicide, how do you think he will react? Guilt? Dream on. He can't wait for you to die. If you die, he can continue to do evil things with peace of mind. But are you willing? When you step on the road to the underworld and hear that person's mocking laughter, will you really not regret it? You think about it carefully. The huge teardrops dripped down like pearls. Ear said helplessly, but what should I do? Every time I step out of the door, I hear a lot of people pointing at me behind. Even Brother Zhou abandoned me. I'm so useless. I'm really not that strong. Ningxu said slowly. There are bad people and good people in this world. There are even more people who are neither good nor bad. Everyone has a mouth. We can't stop what they want to say, but we can decide whether to listen or not. The more others want you to live like a pile of mud so that they can talk about you, the more you should live well, and give those people a slap in the face. Of course, if you really can't hold on, there's another way. Leave the capital and go to a place where no one knows you. No one knows what you've encountered, and no one will point at you. Everything starts again. Isn't that good? Is this really okay? Ningxu patted the back of her hand gently to give her strength. Yes, or you can try it first. If it really doesn't work, it's not too late to go to that dead end. You're only a teenager. There are still a lot of delicious food that you haven't eaten, a lot of beautiful scenery that you haven't seen, and a lot of people that you haven't met. Go and take a look before you decide, okay? The storm calmed down. There was no more excitement to watch. The crowd that gathered gradually dispersed. They watched the mother and daughter who were hugging each other leave. Ear walked forward hesitantly. In the end, she turned around and said to her, "Can I know the name of my benefactor?" Ningxu cupped her hands angrily. "Oh, my surname is Ning. My name is Ningping. It's just a small matter. Don't call me benefactor. I don't deserve it." Ear's eyes sparkled. She bent her knees and saluted. "Thank you, little brother Ning. Or will never forget what you said today." Ningxu smiled and waved at her until a hand behind her took her back. Behind her, Xiaoqing said coldly, "Are you playing the hero to save beauty? Are you addicted? In any case, she's a little beauty. I can't watch her die with my own eyes. Moreover, we're both women. I can't ask her to repay me with her body." Xiaoqing pulled up the corner of his mouth. "It sounds like you're quite regretful? You're really something." Ningxu quickly shook her head like a rattledrum. No, how would this subordinate dare? This subordinate will always be loyal to your highness. However, if she secretly pledges her heart to me because of this, it's not something this subordinate can stop. Alas. Xiaoqing smacked her head. Ningxu quickly blocked her head. Xiaoqing accidentally touched her right hand. He frowned when he noticed the unusual sticky liquid on her hand. "What's the matter? Are you bleeding?" When I took the girl's scissors, I accidentally cut it. I was wrong. Your Highness, don't be angry. I was really wrong." Ningxu originally thought that this was just a small storm that happened by chance. She didn't expect that 3 days later, a big case that shocked the court would happen. Chapter 286. 7 in the morning. Ordinary people were going out to work, opening shops and setting up stalls. Their work was in full swing, but inside the Seeking Fragrance terrace it was silent. The delicate and beautiful girls had used all their skills to serve the guests for an entire night, and were currently enjoying a sound sleep. The procuress who got up early was counting the accounts from the day before with a golden abacus, her eyes shining. The pimp who had been urged to get up was lazily arranging the tables and chairs that had been messed up by the guests. He raised his head and gave a big yawn. Suddenly, drip, drip, 2 drops of water fell from the top of his head, making him very annoyed. Motherf *cur, which be *tch accidentally spilled the water again. See if I don't teach her a lesson. The pimp cursed as he rolled up his sleeves and prepared to go upstairs. Then the 3rd drop of water fell, coincidentally hitting the back of his hand. Feeling that the liquid was unusually sticky, he was stunned. He looked down and then, what? The Southern Yen envoy is dead? In the Prince of Namping's residence, Ningxu was stupefied when she heard the news from Heaven's Inquisition. Heaven's Inquisition vividly described. Yes, it was at Xuanfeng Terrace in the West City. A pimp found it first around 7 in the morning. At that time, he was wiping the table downstairs when he felt water dripping from the top of his head. When he crawled upstairs, the corpse of the Southern Yen envoy was already lying on his back. Blood flowed all over the floor and dripped down. It was said that the death was miraculous and tragic. Now that the news has been sent to the palace, the Supreme Court and the Ministry of Justice have already surrounded the entire Xuanfeng Terrace. Among Xiaoqing's 4 capable assistants, Heaven's Inquisition was the best at collecting information. Every day, he would pass through the streets and alleys. All kinds of gossip and news from various manors would be gathered by him in less than an hour, and he would send it back to the manor at the fastest speed. He was a human-shaped parrot spirit. Ningxu sighed and shook her head. The envoy of the Southern Yen Kingdom, no matter how hateful he was, had suddenly died in the capital of the Great Yu. This was not an easy matter to deal with. His Majesty was probably so anxious that smoke was coming out of his head. What about the murderer? Have you found him? All the girls and maids at Xuanfeng Terrace have been arrested and are being tortured. The guests who stayed at Xuanfeng Terrace have also been dragged into the Supreme Court for interrogation. However, this matter is really troublesome. What do you mean? Tianwen spread out his hands and said, the envoy is about to leave the capital, so a banquet was held at Xuanfeng Terrace last night. Many courtiers and their sons were invited, including the eldest son of the Prime Minister and the 7th Prince. Tisk. Ningxu felt the same way. When it rains, it pours. This was it. The sudden death of an envoy was an extremely sensitive matter. If it was not handled properly, it would definitely affect the relationship between the 2 countries. The lives of countless people would be affected, and even the fate of the Great Yu Kingdom would be affected. However, in such a troublesome matter, the Prince of the Great Yu Kingdom had a foot in it. This time, His Majesty should be bald. True enough. Inside the Zichen Hall, the floor was filled with debris. You unfilial son. His Majesty slapped Xiao Yunsen across the face. Blood seeped out of the corner of Xiao Yunsen's mouth, and he fell to his knees. Everyone in the hall was in danger. No one dared to plead for mercy for him, fearing that His Majesty's rage would affect them and their lives would be in danger. Xiao Yunsen was full of grievances. He covered his face and said, Imperial Father, this matter really has nothing to do with Aken. Last night, the envoy held a banquet and repeatedly sent people to invite this son. This son didn't want to go at first, but that envoy said that if this son didn't show up, it would mean that this son wasn't giving face to him in Southern Yen Kingdom. Aken was a coward and did not dare to ruin His Majesty's plans, so he reluctantly went to the banquet. However, Aken only stayed for a short while before returning to the palace. The palace guards and the palace eunuchs and maids can all testify for Aken. That's right, there's also Imperial Mother. Last night, Imperial Mother came to Urchin's palace to remind Aken to study hard. How could the envoy's death be caused by Aken? Imperial Father, you have always understood Aken, so please believe in Aken. Chapter 287. Then why didn't the envoy invite your 4th imperial brother or 6th imperial brother? Why did he invite you again and again? Isn't it because of your bad conduct? And you want me to believe you? Even if I do, what's the use? Will the courtiers believe you? Will the people believe you? Will Southern Yin believe you? I've told you more than once that as a prince, you must be upright and strict. Don't learn from your little uncle and wander around those brothels. But you've repeatedly broken the rules behind my back and even gathered your subordinates to deceive me. You're simply. The emperor waved his sleeves and angrily said, "Come, beat all the eunuchs around the seventh prince to death." Everyone in the hall immediately knelt down. The eunuchs all cried and begged for mercy. Xiao Yunsan pulled on the emperor's robe and begged, "Father, they're innocent. It's all Urchin's fault. Please punish Ken." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice, Wang Han, was from Xiao Yunsan's mother's family, so he had to speak up for him. "Your Majesty, please calm down. The case hasn't been solved yet. The eunuchs around the seventh prince are all witnesses. If they're all beaten to death, there will be more criticism. It won't be too late to punish them after the case is solved." The emperor was angry. At this time, a eunuch came in and reported, "Your Majesty, the deputy envoy of Southern Yin wants to see you and ask for an explanation. He's outside the hall and we can't stop him." The emperor's head buzzed as he spoke. Xiao Yunsan quickly got up to support him. The emperor pushed him away and returned to the throne. He held the cold golden armrest and lowered his head. He gritted his teeth and angrily glared at the courtiers. "Now that Southern Yin wants an explanation, my beloved courtiers, what do you think we should do? The Supreme Court, the Ministry of Justice, the Jingji Province, and my Prime Minister Tan, your eldest son, is also involved." Every time the emperor pointed out a yamen, there would be a few heads hanging down in fear. The most difficult part of this case wasn't how to solve it, but how to take the responsibility of resolving Southern Yan's anger after the case was solved. If they couldn't resolve it, it was fine to lose a head, but they might even kill all 9 generations. This burden was too heavy. Only a fool would take the initiative to accept it. In the crowd, Tan Siwei hesitated for a moment. Just as he was about to raise his head, he was forcefully pulled down by the Supreme Court official, Feng Zheng. The emperor looked around and laughed in anger. "Haha, it seems like my beloved subjects want me to solve this case personally? Good. This is great. Your subjects are terrified." The courtiers knelt down one after another. Wang Han trembled as he wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. He said in a low voice, "Your Majesty, I remember that Ning Shu, the legitimate daughter of Duke Ning, had some ingenious ideas in the previous cases. Why don't we release her from prison? Perhaps she can solve the urgent problem at hand." Who didn't know how hot this sweet potato was? Tan Siwei frowned and immediately said, "Lord Wang, we're all men here. Yet you're letting a woman lead the charge. I'm afraid it's inappropriate." Wang Han mocked. "Then the Supreme Court is prepared to take on this responsibility?" The Supreme Court official, Feng Zheng, hurriedly cried out. He clutched his chest and said that he had a headache. He said that he was old and incompetent. As the highest official of the Supreme Court, even if Tan Siwei wanted to, he had no right to make this decision. Thinking of Ning Shu, his baby face showed deep worry. Hearing Ning Shu's name, the emperor subconsciously frowned. After careful consideration, his eyebrows slowly relaxed. He said in a low voice, "Then release the daughter of the Ning family. I want to see her. Tell her that if she can solve this case smoothly, all her previous crimes will be forgiven." In the prison of the Ministry of Justice, Hui Mo, who was secretly nibbling on a piece of dessert with his back facing the emperor, heard that he was summoned. The dessert in his hand fell to the ground. Suddenly, the book in his hand was no longer fragrant. He walked out of the prison of the Ministry of Justice with small steps and lowered his head. He followed the eunuch beside the emperor and drove into the palace. He was so anxious that his hands were full of cold sweat. If he was asked to perform an autopsy, he wouldn't be afraid, as he could give an 80 or 90% accurate answer. But if he was asked to analyze the case in front of His Majesty and the Southern Yan Kingdom's envoy, even if he had great ability, he couldn't learn from Miss Ning's fearlessness in the face of danger. It was over. He was going to be exposed. Would the emperor directly order him to be beheaded? Wouldn't that mean that the fact that he secretly switched Lady Ning would be exposed? Damn the envoy. You could have died at any time. Why did you have to die in the capital? You killed me. While he was being driven to the brick that led to the Zechen Palace Hall, he was sobbing in his heart with tears streaming down his face. Just when he was so anxious that his heart was in his throat, he suddenly saw the 13th princess coming over with a few palace maids. When she passed by the 13th princess, she suddenly said, "Wait. Isn't this Ning Shu, who was summoned by the emperor to the palace to analyze the case?" The emperor was waiting in the Zechen palace. The head eunuch was anxious. "Yes. The emperor is waiting in the Zechen palace. Princess, please allow this servant to send her in. I will report the details to the princess later." Xiao Zhangping said. Since she is meeting the emperor, how can she be so sloppy and disheveled? How can she dirty the emperor's eyes? If the deputy envoy takes a look, he will think that there is no one in the Great Yu. So he will casually find a beggar to make up the numbers. The emperor will be even angrier. "Eunuch, I am afraid that you won't be able to afford it." The head eunuch just showed a hesitant look. Xiao Zhangping had already ordered to take her away. "Someone, immediately take her to my palace to tidy up. I will be back soon." "Hey, princess." Being forcibly dragged away by a palace maid, Guillermo was still confused. He didn't understand what was going on. He heard the palace maid whisper in a very familiar voice, "Don't worry. It's me. Lady Ning." Guillermo was so excited that his eyes were filled with tears. If it weren't for his status, he would have knelt down and hugged Ning Shu's thigh. Chapter 288. After the time it takes to burn a stick of incense, Ning Shu walked step by step up the jade steps leading to Zechen Palace Hall. She never would have thought that she would be released from the Ministry of Justice's prison because of the envoy's death. She couldn't help but tease. "If that's the case, it's all thanks to the envoy, sir. It's a pity that he has already stepped into the Yellow Springs and won't be able to hear her thanks." She had just stepped into Zechen Palace Hall when she heard the deputy envoy of Nanzhao yelling in the hall, "If you can't find the culprit who killed our envoy within 3 days, then please give us 10 more cities as an apology." Ha, what a big tone. Ning Shu raised an eyebrow and looked into the hall with interest. As expected, His Majesty's face had turned green. All the courtiers were extremely indignant. Su Jin, the scholar of Zhaowen Palace Hall, had started arguing with the deputy envoy. However, the envoy's corpse was still lying in the ice room of the Supreme Court, so even their argument was weakened. Just as the atmosphere in the hall was at daggers drawn, Ning Shu slowly walked in. She first bowed to the emperor, and then leisurely walked in front of the deputy envoy. She smiled and said, "Reporting to the deputy envoy, sir, there is no need for 3 days. A stick of incense is enough." The deputy envoy looked up and down and saw that the one who interrupted was a 16 or 17-year-old girl. Her appearance was outstanding, but the words she said made him laugh his head off. He snorted coldly and reprimanded. "Where did this silly girl come from, speaking nonsense here? You can catch the real culprit in the time it takes to burn a stick of incense? That's the biggest joke in the world." Ning Shu wasn't angry at all when she was looked at with such disdain. Her tone was casual as she said, "Just find someone to take the blame." She spread her hands indifferently. Maybe a manservant was greedy for money and wanted to steal the envoy's belongings, and was discovered by the envoy. The manservant killed the envoy in a fit of excitement, or the envoy stole the beloved girl of other guests and killed for love after getting drunk. In short, just make up a story and push someone to be executed. This matter couldn't be simpler. If the deputy envoy wants to solve the case as quickly as possible and not find the real culprit, then not to mention 1, even 10 or 100 you can be delivered to the deputy envoy's hands. The deputy envoy was even angrier. He stepped forward and said, "Of course I want the real culprit. Let me warn you, if I find out that you are casually looking for someone to take the blame for you, and are trying to fob off Southern Yen, then don't blame us for flattening Great Yu's land with our iron hooves." Such unbridled arrogance simply did not put Great Yu in his eyes at all, and did not put His Majesty in his eyes at all. His Majesty's hand on the dragon throne almost broke the armrest. But even though they were angry, No one could deny the fact that ever since Emperor Shizu encountered the coup of the three princes, his fear of military power had risen to the extreme. Since then, he had begun a century-long policy of valuing the civil and belittling the military. Even if his successors occasionally had the heart to reform, it was difficult to change the old habits. In the end, it was just a drop in the bucket. And in the current dynasty, there were very few famous generals. Since the death of old Prince Yu, Great Yu had painfully lost a fierce general. Now in the entire vast region of Great Yu, only Prince Nanping's residence in Cloud Swallow Province could be considered a mainstay, defending the country to death. A country that had the richest land and the most prosperous economy in the 9 provinces did not have the sharp claws and teeth to match it. It was like a fat rabbit that was naked in front of the shining eyes of a pack of wolves. If Southern Yin decided to send troops at this time, for Great Yu, it would definitely be an unbearable heavy blow. This was also the reason why Southern Yen had always been arrogant and unbridled. Ning Shu's eyes flashed with a touch of coldness, but it quickly disappeared. She continued to maintain a polite attitude, neither servile nor overbearing attitude, and said with a chuckle, "Since the deputy envoy has chosen the real culprit, then Great Yu will be 100 times more cautious and investigate carefully. After confirming that there is no mistake, then we will send the answer to the deputy envoy. Of course, if the deputy envoy has doubts, you can also participate and help us solve the case. My Great Yu and Southern Yan's peaceful coexistence is clear, otherwise His Majesty would not agree to send his most beloved little princess to your country for a political marriage. His Majesty is so sincere, if the deputy envoy still has any complaints, he will open his mouth and ask for 10 more cities as an apology. This will make the 9 regions suspicious, and in your country's heart, the death of the envoy is just a business transaction. If so, my daughter will really misunderstand whether the death of the envoy is a deliberate trap set by your country." The deputy envoy immediately refuted. "What nonsense are you talking about? How could my Southern Yen take the life of the envoy as a joke and do such a despicable thing?" Southern Yen was not afraid of war, but it could not ignore the country's face. Ningxu smiled sweetly. "Who knows? That's right. My daughter is slow-witted and has little talent and knowledge, but before entering the palace, I have inquired. When the deputy envoy was in Southern Yen, he had a big conflict with the envoy. Now that the envoy is dead, and according to the courier, the deputy envoy did not return last night this." Ningxu rolled her eyes, and before the deputy envoy could get angry she said, "Of course my daughter absolutely believes in the deputy envoy's innocence. I believe that the deputy envoy will also give my daughter a chance and give her a few more days to solve this unsolved case." Ningxu's words stabbed directly into the deputy envoy's heart, completely blocking his mouth, not giving him any chance to stir up any more trouble. The deputy envoy's face changed a few times, squinting at Ningxu, and finally smiled maliciously. "What a clever little mouth. Originally, I was going to bring the 13th princess back to the country in 5 days. Then this envoy will give you 2 more days. After 5 days, if you still can't give my country a satisfactory answer, then we will meet on the battlefield." Before flicking his sleeves and leaving, he looked back at Ningxu. "What is your name?" Ningxu slightly bent her knees, gracefully bowing, and said with a smile, "My daughter is Ningxu, please advise me, deputy envoy." "Good, I will remember you." Chapter 289. After leaving Zichen Palace Hall, Ningxu let out a sigh of relief. She had been humiliated in front of Xiahou Qing every day. It had been a long time since she had been able to diss someone so happily. It felt pretty good. However, she soon began to have a headache again. No matter how happy she was to diss someone, it would not help her catch the murderer sooner. She would not naively hope that the envoy's death was due to theft or murder. Ever since this person entered the capital, he had been extremely high profile. In the brothels of the Western Market, in the restaurants of the Eastern Market, and in the pleasure boats on the moon-embracing river, there was no one who did not know his name. He was simply a walking signboard. Who would not be respectful and courteous to him? This signboard was known to be as cunning as a fox and as insidious as a snake. Such a person had died silently in the brothels of the brothels last night. It would be strange if it was not premeditated. She had solved such a sensitive murder case in 5 days. She was really grateful to His Majesty for his kindness. However, time was tight. She did not want to let go of even the blink of an eye. Ning Shu quickened her steps. Just as she was about to leave the palace, she heard someone call her from behind. "Lady Ning, wait for me." Ning Shu turned around. It was Tan Siwei. Before he could greet his colleagues, Tan Siwei jogged to Ning Shu's footsteps. He was happy for her from the bottom of his heart. "It's great that you're out of prison." Ning Shu remembered Tan Siwei's kindness when he brought Huiyemo into prison. She smiled and thanked him. "Thank you, Minister Tan, for taking care of my daughter. I heard that Minister Tan was the only one who spoke up for my daughter in Zichen Palace Hall. I am deeply grateful." When he met Ning Shu's bright eyes, Tan Siwei's baby face burned. "No, it's nothing. It's nothing. Moreover, my ability is limited. I didn't really help Lady Ning. If Miss can solve this case smoothly, it will be a great favor to DU, the Supreme Court, and the Ministry of Justice." "Oh right, Lady Ning is going to start investigating the case, right?" The envoy's body was being kept in the freezer of the Supreme Court. "Would Miss like to conduct an autopsy first or go to the crime scene first? I can give you a lift." Just as Ning Shu was about to decline, someone was waiting for her outside the palace. But then she remembered that she was going to the Supreme Court for an autopsy anyway, so she nodded and said, "Then I'll have to trouble Xiaoqing Tan. I still have a capable helper waiting outside the palace. Xiaoqing, please allow us to go together." "Of course," Tan Siwei said without thinking. As he spoke, his delicate baby face burned even hotter. He turned his head away and said with a lowered voice, "I had a good chat with Miss in the Ministry of Justice's prison. You don't have to be so polite with me." Ning Shu was shocked. What the hell was that? She had been in prison for 7 days, but she had only seen Tan Siwei once. They had only exchanged a few words. What was going on? "Huiyemo, you brat, what did you do behind my back?" At the entrance of the palace, Huiyemo was leaning against the wall leisurely. After the false alarm, he was happy again. He was holding a piece of grass in his mouth and humming a tune that he had learned from somewhere. Suddenly he sneezed loudly. He looked up and saw that the sun was shining brightly. Why did he feel a chill on his neck? He shrunk his neck. Suddenly, he had an animal instinct that reminded him that his life was in danger, and he had to run away. But just as he took the first step, Ning Shu's cold voice came from behind. "Good Huiyemo, sorry to keep you waiting. I'll have to trouble you later. Don't worry, after it's over, I'll thank you properly." Huh. Chapter 290. Ning Shu walked over and patted Huiemo's shoulder gently. She whispered in his ear, "I'll remember this. I'll settle it with you when I have time." Tears streamed down Huiemo's face. However, he knew that he was in the wrong. He lowered his head and followed her like a little girl. No wonder Tianwen said that the envoy's death was extremely tragic. When they arrived at the ice room where the Supreme Court stored the bodies of the important victims, Ning Shu realized that it was not just tragic. It was too horrible to look at. There were 7 or 8 big holes in the envoy's body. His clothes were tattered and soaked in blood. His eyes were pierced and only 2 big bloody holes were left. His cheeks were scratched with blood. The most horrifying part was the lower half of the envoy's body. The most important organ of a man was also. Huiyemo trembled when he saw this. He instinctively protected himself. Oh my God! How much hatred did he have to bear to do such a thing? Ning Shu clicked her tongue and briefly expressed her condolences to him. It was no wonder that the deputy envoy of Zichen Palace Hall would be filled with righteous indignation and ask for 10 cities as compensation. This envoy's death was indeed too tragic. When a person dies, he must have a complete corpse. If he died without a complete corpse, he would have to line up at the bridge of helplessness with his severed head and limbs. His soul could only be repaired when he entered the cycle of reincarnation. She thought about the embarrassing situation of the envoy being surrounded by ghosts on the bridge of helplessness. Those who heard it would be sad and those who heard it would cry. Tan Siwei's face also turned pale. He felt sorry for the envoy. He knew that the current appearance of the envoy was much better. When he received the report in the morning and rushed to the crime scene, even the coroner, who was used to seeing all kinds of rotten corpses, turned around and vomited a few times. He thought that Ning Shu was a girl after all. She would be scared when she saw such a corpse. He said, "Lady Ning, this corpse is really unsightly. Why don't you go to another room and rest for a while? I'll tell you the details when the autopsy results are out." Ning Shu shook her head and said, "In a murder case, the corpse is the most important evidence and the least likely to lie. The key to solving a case is often hidden in the details. If I miss out on the most important details because of fear, then I should go back home and kowtow to His Majesty as soon as possible to ask for forgiveness. Don't worry, I've seen more tragic deaths. I'm not afraid." She said it so calmly that Tan Siwei had no reason to persuade her. At the same time, he respected her even more. Ning Shu walked a few steps towards the envoy. She looked at the corpse carefully and then reached out her hand to Huema. "Gloves." Huema blinked and said flatteringly, "I'm here. How can I trouble Lady Ning to do it? Don't worry, just leave it to me. You just need to watch from the side. If there's anything you want to do, just let me know." At this time, if he didn't find a chance to make up for it, he would be finished when the case was solved and Lady Ning was free to deal with him. Thinking of the good things he did in the prison, Huema's heart trembled. It was too late for him to regret it. Ning Shu glanced at him and said with a chuckle, "All right, then you do it." Finally, he got a chance to show off. Huema smiled and said, "Okay." Tan Siwei didn't even see his hand gesture clearly. All he saw was a row of autopsy tools neatly placed on the autopsy table. Putting on a pair of pig foam gloves, Huima's eyes lit up as he bent down towards the corpse. Ning Shu, approximate time of death. Huema. There are obvious livor mortis on the surface of the skin of the corpse. Based on the current weather and the spread of livor mortis, the corpse should have died between midnight and midnight last night. Ning Shu. How many wounds are there on the body? Which one is the fatal one? Huema carefully checked the body from top to bottom, and then turned to the back of the body. "Let me see. There are 8 stabs in the chest and abdomen. Both eyes are stabbed 3 times. The eyeballs are burst. There are 2 words carved on the face. The strokes are stuck to each other. Let me wipe off the blood and take a look." Sin. Ning Shu. What about the other side? Huema. It's also sin. Tan Siwei. Slitting the face is one of the punishments for criminals. It sounds like a vendetta. Ning Shu. It's possible. Go on. Huema. The lower part of the body was stabbed. The flesh was badly mutilated. I can't tell how many stabs there were. By visual estimation, there were at least 10 stabs. On the surface, the stab wounds on the chest and abdomen were the most frightening. However, when a person was stabbed before death, the wound would turn to the side due to the contraction of the surrounding skin and muscles. However, when a person was stabbed after death, the wound would not. Based on this, it could be inferred that these wounds were not fatal. The real fatal wound was... Huimo searched for a long time before he found a few red dots hidden in the envoy's hair. Here it is. My God, there were 3 extremely long embroidery needles. They pierced into the Baihui acupoint on the top of the head and stirred up the brain. Chapter 291. My God, this method of killing is too ruthless. The embroidery needle piercing into the brain won't kill the person instantly. Instead, the person will experience extreme pain before dying. This person must have hated him to the core to make him die in such a tragic manner. But this is too strange. The envoy is more than 7 feet tall and strong. How could he be killed like a chicken? Even if he was drunk last night, it doesn't make sense. Even if he was dead asleep, he would still wake up and fight back after suffering great pain. As Huimo spoke, Ning Shu recorded the key points. Check his throat and stomach for undigested food residue. See if there are any knockout drugs or some kind of poison. By the way, check if these embroidery needles have been smeared with poison. Okay. Huimo took out a set of silver needles and slid them down the throat of the corpses one by one. None of them were found to be poisoned. He then took out a sharp knife and cut open the abdomen of the corpses. As soon as the stomach was opened, a sour and stinky smell rushed out. Ugh, how much did the envoy eat last night? How much did he drink last night? This smell is simply... Ningxu quickly folded the cloth next to her and handed it to him. Then, she took one for herself and Tan Siwei to cover their mouths and noses. Huimo worked for a long time and said excitedly, "Just now, I put the needles and the mucus in the envoy's stomach into the juice of the purple grass. The color has changed from the original blue to purple. I suspect that the envoy was poisoned with the fragrant bone-softening powder. No wonder he was so obedient. It turns out that he could not move at all. This is not easy to get. The murderer has really put in a lot of effort. Embroidery needles, no offspring. The murderer must be a woman. This is definitely because the envoy has done something heartless and despicable, and the young lady has come to take revenge on him. Embroidery needles, fragrant bone-softening powder, blinded eyes, carved words on the face, 8 wounds, no offspring. These keywords gradually turned into scattered pieces. Ningxu tried to piece them together in her mind, trying to simulate the basic process of the murderer last night. Because of her rapid thinking, her face was extremely calm, like a glossy and flawless crystal gem. Your deduction is reasonable. However, they couldn't be too arbitrary. Sometimes, some clever murderers would take advantage of people's usual logic and do the opposite. They would deliberately set up a smokescreen to trick people so that they could get away with it. Before we find more solid evidence, we can't rule out a group of suspects. That's true. Some murderers are very cunning and good at setting traps for the government. Guillermo nodded and took off his dirty and smelly gloves. The body has been examined. That's all we can find. Should we go to the crime scene to see if there are any more clues? Or do you want to interrogate the guests and girls from last night? Ningxu thought for a moment and said, "Let's go take a look at the crime scene first. We have to familiarize ourselves with the layout and structure of Xuanfang Station to understand the whole process of the crime, and see if we can rule out some suspects." Ningxu felt a headache when she thought of the long list of suspects. What kind of place was Xuanfang Station? There were hundreds of girls, maids and pimps, plus the guests who came to have fun. But she only had 5 days. God, you are really good at giving me problems. They packed up and covered the body with the white cloth again. When the white cloth covered the upper body of the envoy, Ningxu looked at it and suddenly said, "What's on his neck?" On his neck? Guillermo bent down and looked at it carefully. "Let me see. Oh, it's a few scratches. But the wounds have healed and the scabs are almost gone. It seems that it has been there for a while. It should have nothing to do with the murder last night." Ningxu nodded and continued to think. Embroidery needles, carved words, no offspring, blinded eyes. Why did she vaguely feel that these words were inexplicably familiar? As if she had seen them before. Where was it? Chapter 292. With a stomach full of questions, Ningxu and Huiyemo walked out of the Dali Temple. Ningxu politely saluted. "Xiao Tan, please stay. We can go to Xuanfang Station by ourselves. The people related to the case are all in the Dali Temple. After you carefully interrogate them, please tell my daughter the results." She couldn't count on the Ministry of Justice. In the case of old Princess Yu, Wang Han showed obvious hostility to her. Today, His Majesty asked her to solve the case. She heard that it was Wang Han who pushed her into the fire pit. She would be thankful if he didn't hit her when she was down. Chen Ziqing of the Jingji Prefecture also had a grudge with her before. So her only hope was in the Dali Temple. Tan Siwei had a delicate and amiable baby face, but he was much more loyal than the others when it came to doing things. For the convenience of investigating the case, she tied up all her hair into a single spiral bun. She only wore a white jade hairpin in the shape of a jade rabbit. Her entire neck was exposed, looking clear and elegant. When she nodded, she slightly lowered her head, so her slender white neck was outlined by the collar into a beautiful crescent moon shape. Tan Siwei only glanced at it, and hurriedly looked away. He said in a hurry, "This is my duty as an official. Miss, you don't have to treat me like an outsider. Moreover, I'm flattered to have the opportunity to work with you to solve such a big case. By the way, the murderer of this case is extremely cruel. I'm afraid the process of solving the case will be very dangerous. Please be careful." His eyes were watery and his words were sincere, like a shy girl. This appearance made Ningxu even more suspicious. She immediately glanced sharply at Huiyemo, who was desperately hiding beside her, as if to say, "You better explain to me what's going on later. Otherwise, don't blame me for being ruthless." "Ah, Xiaoqing Darren is too polite. Thank you." "Ah, you're too polite. No need." Yes, you're too polite." Ningxu braced herself and chatted with Tan Siwei. Just when she was about to leave, she saw Forsythia's carriage stopped in front of the Dali temple. Her mother and Princess Xian came down from the carriage with a smile. Ningxu's eyes lit up in surprise, and she was about to go forward to help him up. Princess Xian covered her mouth with a handkerchief and laughed. She joked. "Sure, you are too polite. Why are you treating Xiaoqing like an outsider? We are going to be a family in the future anyway." "What? What is mother talking about? Why can't I understand?" Ningxu's smile stiffened. Princess Xian walked over and intimately held Ningxu's hand and patted it. "Sure, are you shy? Didn't mother mention it to you before? Your father and I both felt that Prime Minister Tan's youngest son, Tan Xiaoqing, was extremely good in both appearance and character. Thus, we spoke to the Prime Minister and his wife. Later, you were summoned into the palace by the Empress and were thrown into the prison of the Ministry of Justice because of your crimes. Mother was extremely worried and thought that the marriage was over. She didn't expect that Tan Xiaoqing didn't mind at all. Instead, he took the initiative to propose marriage when we were at our lowest point. How could your father and I not agree? We were just waiting for you to come out of prison to tell you the good news." But Ningxu was extremely anxious. Just as she was about to speak, she was interrupted by Princess Xian. "But what? Oh, mother knows. It must be because you are embarrassed to say this in front of Tan Xiaoqing. It's mother's fault. I forgot about this. Good. Xiaoqing still has official business to attend to, so we won't disturb him." Princess Xian nodded slightly at Tan Siwei. Tan Siwei hurriedly performed a junior's greeting. Then, with a red face, he bowed to Ningxu and went back to interrogate the suspects. After Tan Siwei left, Ningxu finally had a chance to speak. "Mother, why didn't you discuss this marriage with me in advance? Why did you decide it in such a hurry?" Princess Xian revealed a surprised expression. "On the 15th day of last year, you were playing on the swing. While playing, you suddenly fell from the swing and fell unconscious. Mother waited by your side for 3 days and 3 nights before you woke up. When you woke up, the first thing you said was, 'Please ask me and your father to quickly arrange a marriage for you. As long as it wasn't from the imperial family, you wouldn't object to any family's young master.' At that time, we thought you were muddle-headed from the fall and said something stupid. You swore to the heavens. 'Everything will be decided by me and your father. Even if you are crippled and stupid, you are willing to marry. Otherwise, you will be struck by lightning.' Only then did we take it seriously. Previously, your father helped you find a match for young General Song, third young Master Qi, and later Cloud Leaf. You didn't have any objections. Unfortunately, there were many accidents later, and the marriage never came to fruition. Now Prime Minister Tan's family's young master took the initiative to propose marriage. This is such a rare thing. It would be difficult to find a more suitable candidate than Tan Xiaoqing. Moreover, Tan Xiaoqing also said that you had a good chat with him in prison. What's wrong? Is Shu blaming Yangqin?" Chapter 293. "No, I'm not blaming you, it's just that." Suddenly, such an unexpected thing fell from the sky, making Ningxu completely stupefied. She doesn't know what to say and only feels her heart is in a mess. She sighs softly and says, "You should know that the person who has been staying in prison is not me. Nyangqin knows that it wasn't you, but Nyangqin also knows that if it wasn't for Tan Xiaoqing's help, you wouldn't have been able to get out of prison, right?" Princess Hexin holds Ningxu's hand. Her eyes, which have always been as gentle as water, at this moment, have a different kind of clarity. Ningxu opens her mouth, but is unable to say anything. Because what her mother said was right. Those words were indeed said by her, and that oath was also made by her. At that time, She had just returned to her first life by King Chujiang. The moment she opened her eyes, she saw her parents who gave birth to her, raised her, loved her, and protected her. For a moment, she was so emotional that her throat choked up, and she could only silently shed 2 lines of tears. That 300 years of heaven's punishment, 7 lives and 7 lives that won't end well, constantly lingered in her mind. Therefore she made an ambition. In this life, she would never touch that beautiful and repulsive word love. She would find someone to marry, endure the curse of 17 years old, protect her family, and then peacefully live a life of idleness, eating and waiting for death, enjoying life to her heart's content. But she never thought that she would meet that person. And after meeting him, can she really be as free and easy as before? Her heart, which has always been firm, is now violently shaken. Ning Shu's eyes absent-mindedly flash, and her fingernails deeply dig into her palms. Shu'er, you have just been released from prison, so I should have taken you back to the food to wash away the dust in the brazier. But Nyangqin knows that you are anxious to solve the case, so Nyangqin can only do something simple. The carriage has prepared water soaked in grapefruit leaves for you to wash your hands. Also, this red string was specially requested by Mother from the Xianghua temple. Hurry up and tie it. Remember to wrap it around 3 times. Her mother's worried exhortations continued to ring in her ears. She raised her head, and suddenly saw a slender figure standing under a tall and lush camphor tree on the opposite side of the road. His long belt and black brocade tail fluttered in the warm wind. With Jiuxi's support, he silently faced her direction. She didn't know how long he had been standing there. Ning Shu's heart suddenly stopped. It was Xiaoqing. She couldn't help but take a step in his direction. As if sensing her footsteps, he whispered to Jiuxi, "Let's go." He quickly boarded the carriage of the Namping mansion. Princess He Xian asked in shock. "Shu'er, what are you doing?" Ning Shu had already chased after them, but the more she chased, the faster the carriage went. Jiuxi looked back and said, "Shitzi, Miss Ning is still chasing after us." Inside the closed curtain, Xiaoqing's voice didn't have a trace of warmth. "Then go faster." "Yes." Ning Shu watched the familiar carriage blend into the crowd and the traffic. It shrank into a small black spot until it could no longer be seen. She stopped and held her chest, panting violently. Huiyemo also followed. He knew that he was in the wrong, so he shrank beside her and didn't dare to say anything. Ning Shu turned back and said angrily, "What did you talk about with Tan Siwei in the prison of the Ministry of Justice?" Huiyemo stammered, "No, nothing. I said that Tan Siwei is young and talented, and I admire him very much. Lady Ning, I really didn't want to frame you. I just wanted to cheat some delicious food and fun things from him to pass the time. Who knew that he couldn't stand teasing? He blushed when I teased him, so I—" Ning Shu sneered. "So you were addicted to teasing him?" I didn't do it on purpose." Huiyemo held his head and said, "Didn't the outside world say that he was flexible and tactful? At first, I thought he was pretending to be stupid, so I wanted to expose his true colors. But I didn't expect that he was really stupid. Lady Ning, I really know I was wrong. Please forgive me." Ning Shu said angrily, "I was really killed by you." Chapter 294. Miss, I see that your forehead is full and your cheeks are slightly red. You are going to have a lot of luck with men recently. Do you want to know when you will meet your destined one? You just need to give me some money and I will do it for you. As soon as Ning Shu arrived at the West Market where Xuanfang Terrace was located, she was stopped by a fake Taoist priest. Hearing the words luck with men, Ning Shu's forehead bulged and her molars became cold. She said coldly, "My face is red because I ran away just now. My forehead is full because I was angry. As for money, I don't have a single copper coin with me. If you want money, you can go to the Emperor or Duke Ning to ask for it. As for fortune-telling, I have learned it, but I learned to calculate people's lifespan. Taoist priest, do you want me to do it for you for free?" When the fake Taoist priest heard this, he hurriedly put away the fortune-telling banner and moved to the side with his tail between his legs. Then he and the other passers-by stared with wide eyes as she walked into the alley and into the Fong-seeking platform that was tightly surrounded by officials. He suddenly realized that no wonder she was so difficult to deal with. It turned out that she was the famous female general who brought bad luck to her husband, and was sent by His Majesty to investigate the case of the envoy's murder, Ning Shu. It was said that the envoy's death really made people shiver. Although they didn't earn any copper coins, there was a good show to watch. It was not a loss. Lady Ning, there is water on the ground and the road is slippery. Please come this way. Huimo was very cautious along the way, but he still tried to please his wife. Ning Shu, who had been silent all the way, finally stopped and gave him a look. Huimo promised seriously, Lady Ning, don't worry. I am the one who caused this trouble. I will explain it to His Highness. Ning Shu smiled bitterly. He could explain it clearly, but the engagement had been fixed. Even if he explained 1,000 times, he couldn't turn back time and tear up the engagement. Thinking of the silent figure of Xiahou Qing under the camphor tree, and the scene of the carriage of Prince Namping's mansion disappearing in front of her eyes, she suddenly had a headache. However, due to the urgency of the situation, they could only put the matter of the engagement aside for the time being and wait for the case to end in 5 days before considering a solution. Ning Shu took a deep breath and cleared her mind temporarily. She forced herself to calm down and deal with the current situation. Let's talk about it later. Let's investigate the case first. She was indebted to Huimo. Now that things had come to this, it was meaningless to haggle over it. Huimo was moved to tears. Yes, I will definitely perform well. Huimo was responsible for observing the terrain around the platform. Ning Shu walked up the stairs and boarded the platform. She said to the officer who was responsible for guarding the platform, Did you bring the brothel mother here? I heard that the first young Master Tan was the one who arranged the banquet last night. I'll have to trouble you to make a trip to the Prime Minister's residence, and say that Ning Shu invited you. The officer said. The first young master heard that Lady Ning was coming to investigate the case early in the morning, so he came here to wait for you. He is now in the middle of the platform. As soon as the officer finished speaking, a blue figure came out from the middle of the platform. Ning Shu looked up and saw Tan Xixian's iconic peach blossom eyes with his usual smile. But the smile was inevitably bitter today. Seeing Ning Shu, he first bowed to her and said politely, Greetings, Lady Ning. The first young master is too polite. My daughter Ning Shu greets the first young master. After Ning Shu returned the greeting, Tan Xixian turned sideways and opened his hands to invite Ning Shu in. While leading the way for Ning Shu, he said apologetically, Thank you, Lady Ning. Speaking of which, last night's banquet was arranged by the first young master at the request of the first young master. I didn't expect that such a thing would happen. The first young master. Alas, in the end, it's my fault. I didn't arrange enough guards in advance. I can't shirk the responsibility of the first young master's death. I'm sorry to have caused trouble to Lady Ning. Ning Shu also said politely, The first young master helped because of the kindness of others. It happened so suddenly. How could the first young master know that someone would secretly kill the first young master? Please don't blame yourself. Ning Shu and Tan Xixian had met a total of 2 times before. Her impression of this person was neither good nor bad. She only felt that this person was smooth and slick in dealing with people. No matter where she was, with whom she was with, she would be considerate and not offend anyone. For example, when the first young master stared at her hand and said something offensive, he was the one who smoothed things over. Another example was the death of the first young master. There were so many young masters who attended last night's banquet, including the 7th prince. They all wanted to hide as far away as possible. However, he was waiting for her here early in the morning, and even took the responsibility for it. He was smooth and slick, but he didn't lie. Coupled with his good looks, it was hard to dislike him. Chapter 295. Tan Siwei said gratefully, Thank you, Lady Ning, for your understanding and forgiveness. The place where the envoy met with his accident was on the balcony above here. Ning Shu nodded and followed him up the wooden stairs. The Seeking Fragrance platform was 8 zhang tall and had 3 floors. Each floor had a different purpose. The first floor was mainly used to attract ordinary customers. There was a stage in the middle of the lobby. At the top of the stage, there was a huge lotus-glazed lamp. It was beautiful and magnificent. At first glance, one could tell that it was an expensive item imported from the western regions. Dozens of tables and chairs surrounded the platform. Every night, the customers could enjoy the beautiful singing and dancing performances of the girls at close range. The second floor was the balcony and the greenhouse for most of the ladies. When the guests were satisfied with the performances, they would enter the room with the ladies they liked. The purpose of this was unknown. The third floor was a private room that was specially used to receive distinguished guests. It was the residence of the 8 leading ladies of the Xuanfang Terrace. In addition, there was a wide terrace facing the south. The arrangement was extremely gorgeous. There was not a single thing lacking. At the western corner of the terrace, there was even a small bamboo forest that could be worth 1 or 2 taels of gold per inch. Many guests who liked to sing about the wind and moon would come here to guide the galaxy and drink and sing. This was also a big selling point that Xuanfang TV had always been proud of. Last night, the envoy from the southern Yan kingdom who came from afar died here. His blood soaked the thick wooden floor and dripped onto the private seats on the second floor. The weather was hot. In order to preserve his body, the envoy's body had been moved to the ice house of the Supreme Court. What was left in front of Ningshu was a pool of dried and black blood. Smelling the blood, the flies flew over and feasted on the blood. She couldn't chase them away. The splashes around the pool of blood clearly showed how horrible the envoy's death was last night. There seemed to be a few pieces of flesh mixed in the pool of blood. There was half a footprint beside the pool of blood. She didn't know if it was the envoy's own, or if it was accidentally stepped on by the frightened pimp this morning, or if it was the murderer. She still needed to verify. Other than the pool of blood, the surroundings were not too messy. Only a few pots of orchids were overturned in the corner. On the long table not far away, the unfinished wine cups from last night were still there. All kinds of delicacies had lost their original taste due to being placed there for a long time, and were gradually rotting under the warm sunlight. The officer in charge of guarding the crime scene said. The procuress said that the guests came here to have fun. After a night of fun, most of them will sleep until noon. So in order not to disturb the guests, they will come here in the afternoon to clean up. Ningshu calculated the distance between the rooms of the top hostesses and this place. She said, based on what you said, if the blood didn't drip down, they probably wouldn't have found out that the envoy had died here until the afternoon. Yes. Ningshu put on a pair of gloves and picked up the fragments of the flower pot that had been knocked over. She analyzed the direction of the force and said, Eldest young master, I'll have to trouble you to tell me the details of last night's banquet. I will definitely tell you everything I know. Tan Xixian said slowly in a gentle voice. It's like this. The envoy has been on a diplomatic mission to Great Yu for more than a month, and his return date is near. So before he leaves, he prepared to invite many friends he made here to show his gratitude. Ningshu put the pieces back to their original position and continued to check the next corner. She thought, friends? They're just a bunch of bad friends. The envoy said that the etiquette between Southern Yan and Great Yu is different. He was afraid of being neglected, so he asked me to share his burden. To be honest, I have an ulterior motive for getting close to the envoy recently. I want to use him to open up a trade route with Southern Yan and make a lot of money. If he has a request, I can't refuse it. Ningshu nodded to express her understanding. The way of business has always been like this. Tan Xixian was frank. Xuanfang Terrace was a place that the envoy chose himself. Because Lady Susu and Lady Drinking Snow here are outstanding, the envoy was quite fond of them. This terrace is also a golden signboard in the West Market. Ordinary people may not be able to enter even if they throw gold at it. Before the envoy leaves the capital, he must fulfill his wish. Because I deal in silk, tea, and the Western region's spices and glass business, I have a lot of contacts with the procuress of Xuanfang Terrace. So, I helped pull the strings and got the opportunity to admire the moon on the terrace. Last night at 5:30 p.m., the golden crow was about to fall and the glass lanterns were lit. When the seventh prince arrived, the sound of musical instruments and the banquet officially began. Chapter 296. Ning Shu asked. Who exactly attended the banquet last night? In addition to the seventh prince and me, there was also Minister Zhao of the Secretariat, Minister Liu of Qingche, the third son of Assistant Minister Wang, the eldest son of Secretary Sima, and the fourth son of Minister Jiang. Tan Xixian reported a string of names and then continued. Last night, other than admiring the moon and drinking and having fun, we didn't do anything out of the ordinary. The seventh prince was the first to leave. Because he was afraid that the emperor would punish him, he hurried back to the palace at 7. The rest of us stayed until 9, and then left one after another. Ning Shu asked directly, who was the last to leave? What time was it? And who stayed at the Xuanfang terrace? Tan Xixian coughed awkwardly and said, I should be the last to leave. It was about 8:45. After sending the rest of the officials and young masters out, I left. The ones who stayed at the terrace should be Minister Liu, Child Sima, Child Wang, Child Jiang and myself. According to what you said, the envoy should have stayed at the top house last night. Why did he come back to the terrace? I wasn't there after that. I was shocked when I heard that the envoy was killed this morning, so I immediately rushed over. As for what the envoy and the other young masters did after that, I really don't know. Then which top house did the envoy choose last night? If I remember correctly, it should be Miss Susu. Ning Shu nodded. Seeing that Hui Ma had finished checking the surrounding terrain, she hurriedly waved her hand and asked him to come over. She asked him to check the leftovers, wine jugs and wine glasses. After checking, Hui Ma shook his head at Ning Shu in disappointment. Although Ning Shu was mentally prepared, she still couldn't help but feel disappointed. She glanced around and suddenly found half a plate of leftover roast mutton. Before I came, I looked at the menu of the Xuanfang terrace. It didn't seem to be this dish. Tan Xixian glanced at it and said, Oh, I bought it separately. It's in the restaurant across the street. His family's roast mutton was especially famous. It was personally roasted by a chef from the western regions. The taste was especially different from ours, and the aroma could be smelled from far away. The seventh prince had just arrived and said that he wanted to eat. How could the envoy not be satisfied? Hence, he instructed the servants to buy some for him. When the owner of the restaurant heard that His Highness the seventh prince had come, he was very attentive. He ordered the waiter to keep an eye on the chef and send it over as soon as it was done. When it was sent upstairs, it was still boiling hot. The taste was indeed extraordinary. What about the waiter? He left after delivering the mutton. After carefully inspecting every corner of the balcony, Ning Shu looked at the exquisitely decorated balcony that was filled with blood. She was silent for a long time. Then she turned her head and looked seriously at Tan Xixian. Eldest young master, please tell me honestly. After coming to the capital, has the envoy made enemies with anyone, offended anyone, or done anything inappropriate? Tan Xixian was stunned for a moment. He pursed his lips and didn't speak. After a while he said, It is not a gentleman's behavior to speak ill of others behind their backs. However, this matter concerns the cause of the envoy's death. I can only be a villain for once. After the envoy came to the capital, he often went to brothels. Most of the time, he was accompanied by me. Even when he was drunk, I would persuade him from the side. There was only one time when I saw a few fresh scratches on the envoy's neck. Out of curiosity, I asked what happened. The envoy replied, Last night on the road, I ran into a little wild cat that threw itself into my arms. I wanted to have some fun with it, but I was scratched by the little wild cat. As for the identity of the little wild cat that you speak of, I have no way of knowing. Ning Shu frowned. Does eldest young master remember what day of the month it was when the envoy said this? The 9th day of the 5th month. The 9th day of the 5th month. Ning Shu kept this date in her mind. Suddenly, she remembered the weak and desperate cry she heard not long ago by the Chaobai River. Jade hairpin flower, Xuanfang Terrace, Lady Susu. Could it be her? Chapter 297. Seeing Ning Shu was silent for a long time, Tan Xixian whispered, Lady Ning? Ning Shu quickly regained her senses. Tan Xixian curiously asked, Miss, have you found any clues? That matter was just her guess, and she couldn't make a conclusion. In order to avoid involving an innocent girl, Ning Shu said, "Not yet, I'm just thinking about some things. Thank you for your help today, eldest young master." Eldest young master must have a lot of business to do, so I won't disturb eldest young master. It's just a small matter. If I can help, it's my honor. Then I'll leave first. If Miss needs anything, I'll be there in a moment. After sending Tan Sixian away, Guillermo smacked his lips with great interest. He pinched his chin and commented, "The outside world says that Prime Minister Tan's second son is smooth and slick in dealing with people. But I think it's the complete opposite. That guy is obviously a fool. But this eldest son is gentle and elegant. He knows when to advance and retreat. He doesn't look like a businessman who falls into the eyes of copper coins. If such a person enters the officialdom, the Tan family will probably have another prime minister. What a pity." As soon as Tan Sixian was mentioned, Ning Shu's mind exploded again. She chuckled. "Instead of talking about other people's family matters, it's better to help me find clues. I just asked you to check the surrounding terrain. What's the result?" "Oh, look at my brain. I forgot about the important matter." Guillermo patted his forehead and took out a map from his arms. "This Fong-seeking platform is located in the northeast corner of the West City. It's backed by the upper reaches of the Chaobai River. Look, the place we are standing is the best place to enjoy the view of the Chaobai River. The front door is facing this restaurant called Dong Lai Shun. There are 2 alleys on both sides. The left side is a tiled house, and the right side is another brothel called Bai Hua Lu. According to the surrounding people, these 2 brothels are famous in the West City for not getting along with each other. When the news of the envoy's sudden death spread out, the brothel owner of Bai Hua Lu laughed until her mouth was crooked. Although Huimo looked careless and unreliable, he was very meticulous in his work. On the map he marked the terrain around the Search Fong platform in great detail. He even marked the width of the alley, the number of doors and windows around it, and the distance to the tile shack and Baihua building. Ning Shu looked at it seriously for a while, then tapped on the drawing with her finger. "There are small doors on both the east and west sides of the platform. Why isn't there any on the side near the river? Xuanfang Terrace is built next to the Chaobai River. Below the 8 steps is the river bank. The reason why they didn't set up a small door here is probably because they were afraid that drunken customers would accidentally slip into the river. Also, the brothel keeper purposely set up a fence near the river, probably for the same reason. What you mean is that if you want to enter the seeker platform, you have to go from the east, west, and south sides. You definitely can't come up from the north side of the river?" Guillermo nodded vigorously. "I've seen it. The embankment is 40 feet high. Below the embankment is the turbulent waves of the Chaobai River. If you want to climb up the embankment, I'm afraid your Qinggong will be able to reach the sky." Ning Shu nodded in understanding and asked the officer next to her, "Are all the small doors guarded?" "Of course. When I caught them this morning, I asked them. They are in this kind of business. What they are most afraid of is that people come to make trouble and customers don't pay and run away. Therefore, every door is guarded, and the guards are all sharp-eyed. Not only that, last night, the envoys invited all the guests to the banquet. Therefore, young Master Tan specially arranged people to guard the stairs connecting the 2nd floor and the 3rd floor to prevent some drunken people from making trouble in the private rooms upstairs and disturbing the guests." Guillermo blinked. "According to what you said, outsiders can't sneak in to commit murder, and people on the 1st and 2nd floor can't enter the 3rd floor. The murderer must be the young master of the aristocratic family who stayed last night, or one of the leading ladies. Then the list of suspects has been narrowed down a lot." The officer smiled bitterly and said, "If it were really that simple, we would be able to solve this case by ourselves. The problem is that the young masters who stayed here last night testified against each other. After they went into their rooms to rest, they didn't come out again. They were even woken up by the screams of the pimp. Even Miss Susu, who is the most suspicious, has a witness. She said that she didn't serve the envoys well last night, and made the envoys unhappy. The envoys slapped her and slammed the door. Susu's maid came in and comforted her for a long time. Then the 2 of them slept in the same room. Young Master Wang next door also testified that he heard the noise, but he was too drunk to come out. Chapter 298. Ning Shu asked, "Didn't they say where the envoy went after he left the house?" The officer answered, "They said they saw the envoy walking towards the balcony, but they didn't see it clearly." Ning Shu immediately walked to Susu's room and found that Susu's room was in the southwest corner. It made sense that she didn't see it clearly. Hey, this is strange. Why didn't he find another beauty in the middle of the night and go to the balcony to enjoy the cold wind? Is there a beautiful female ghost on the balcony that seduced his soul? The people outside can't come in, and the people inside can testify for each other. Is it true that the female ghost floated in to confuse the envoy, killed him, and then escaped through the wall? Hui Mo's imagination was so rich that he even amused himself. Ning Shu's eyes were as clear and calm as the morning dew. She looked straight ahead and observed how far the envoy would go from the room to the balcony, and where he would pass by on the way. Even in the impregnable palace, fourth Miss Chi could disappear from the fragrant hall. What is there to be surprised about in this world? My master once said, unsolved cases in this world are confusing and unsolvable at first glance, but in fact, they all have their own key points. If the key point is found, then everything will be clear. If they couldn't find it, many people would attribute it to ghosts and demons, casting a dark shadow over these unsolved cases, and ending them hastily. In fact, 9 out of 10 cases that are disguised as ghosts can be proved to be man-made. What about the other case? Either he didn't care about his life or he was unlucky. After walking this part of the road, Ning Shu walked around the murder scene and asked Hui Mo to copy the half of the footprints beside the pool of blood on the paper. As for the reason why she didn't write, she admitted that her drawing skills were indeed too outstanding, and she was too embarrassed to see it. After doing all this, Ning Shu took the blueprint and started walking from the 3rd floor, floor by floor. She didn't miss a single door or window, and finally reached the 1st floor with great difficulty. Then, she climbed step by step back to the 3rd floor. Just like that, she kept going back and forth from all the small doors in all directions. For a whole hour, she had a clear understanding of the terrain here. Hui Mo was dizzy and his stomach was beating. Lady Ning, it's almost noon. Shall we eat something before we continue? Ning Shu thought for a while and agreed. She had asked the officials to bring the procuress and Susu here from the Dali temple. They should be here in 2 hours. It's a good time to fill up her stomach. So she got up and patted the dust off her hands. Let's go. Hui Mo said excitedly. Then let's go to Dong Laishan. Their roast mutton is really fragrant. When I went to explore the terrain before, the aroma kept circling around me. I was almost drooling. No wonder the princes like to eat it. The two walked out of Xuanfang Terrace one after the other. After a few steps, they saw a beggar-like old woman sitting there not far away. She was mumbling something and the officials couldn't drive her away. Hui Mo looked over and said, "Oh, that old woman. She was there just now. People nearby said that she is a lunatic. She has been crazy for more than 20 years. She talks nonsense all day long. No one cares about her." Ning Shu was about to walk away when she suddenly heard a few words coming out of the old woman's mouth. She walked over and bent down. "Old woman, what are you talking about? I seem to have heard you just say, she revenge?" The old woman was shocked. She suddenly grabbed Ning Shu's hand and screamed, "She is back. She must be back. Xue Hongyi is back for revenge." Xue Hongyi. Hearing this name, Ning Shu suddenly had a flash of white light in her mind. She finally found the reason for the inexplicable familiar feeling that lingered in her mind after she saw the envoy's death. Embroidery needle, carving words, cutting off the penis, blinding eyes. When she was a child, she once saw an almost identical murder case in the cold case records collected by her master for many years. The name of the murderer was Xue Hongyi. After telling Hui Mo, he was shocked. The same way of murder. It must be the same person who committed the crime. Let's catch this person called Xue Hongyi quickly. Ning Shu turned her head and looked at him silently. More than 20 years ago, after the real murderer was exposed, she turned around and jumped into the river to commit suicide. Her body sank in the water for a night before it was fished out from downstream. She really died. Are we going to catch her in the grave? Hui Mo was stunned and then frightened. He had goosebumps all over his body. He jumped back and said, "Ah, Lady Ning, don't make such a joke. I'm scared." Chapter 299. Every day, all kinds of new things happened in Shi City. Life's joys and sorrows were condensed here. Not to mention, who could suddenly remember something that happened 20 years ago? Until the old woman called out Shuehangi. The old people who stayed here suddenly realized that Shuehangi was that Shuehangi. Since the founding of Great Yu, the capital Shi City had gone through 100 years before it gradually became the charming and gentle scene of beautiful women everywhere. In these 100 years, there was a new courtesan queen every year. Every 3 to 5 years, the beauties who once dominated the capital would be thrown to the back of people's minds. Shuehangi was definitely not the most gorgeous of them all, but she was the most unique of them all. She was born in a family of generals. Because her father was defeated, her family declined. Her fiancé's family, who had been engaged to her since she was a child, personally submitted a letter of impeachment to the emperor. After her father was executed, her sister-in-law lost her husband. Faced with the help of her fiancé's family, she tore the marriage contract in half on the street and said that she would rather be a brothel girl than marry into the enemy's family. Many people thought that she was just speaking out of anger. Unexpectedly, when she turned around, she really walked into 100 Flowers Tower. With a unique sword dance, she became the new courtesan queen. If a beauty was only beautiful on the outside, after a shallow taste, it would quickly become boring. Her beauty was hidden in her bones, unique and unique. Her natural and unrestrained personality was pursued by countless famous young masters. In order to obtain a glance from her, they did not hesitate to fight, but she was still free and easy. No matter high or low, if she liked, she would not take a single cent. If she was unhappy, she would not take even 10,000 gold. It was as if she was playing with men, and not the other way around. It was said that even the Su Wangya at that time wanted to marry her as a concubine, but she flatly refused. Everyone was guessing which man would subdue this hot and suffocating red rose. Or would she subdue all the men in the world? Until one day, without warning, she suddenly took off her card and refused to accept a guest. She redeemed herself and said that she was going to marry. The person she chose was not a noble, nor was he a rich merchant. Instead, he was an ordinary scholar. The betrothal gift was a poem, and the dowry was her. She cut off her past life as soon as she said so. She took off her luxurious clothes, threw away the brocade ornaments, and changed into coarse hemp clothes. Every day, she peacefully embroidered the dragon and phoenix wedding dress and red shoes for herself in the small house. Countless people were filled with regret and regret. There were even people who brought all their belongings to block her door, begging her to give them another chance. She never came out of the house. Gradually, everyone's thoughts faded, and they shifted their attention to the next courtesan. However, they heard a shocking piece of news. On the night before Shuehangi's wedding, she was suddenly humiliated and lost her virginity. Some people said, "What kind of innocence is a brothel girl's innocence?" In any case, her jade-like arms were pillowed on by 1,000 men, and her lips were tasted by 10,000 men. In the face of those people's mockery and ridicule, she wiped away her tears and calmly ran to break off the engagement. Then, she went to 100 Flowers Tower to retrieve the sword that her father had left for her. The next night, the hooligan who raped her was stabbed several times. His eyes were poked blind, his sinful root was cut off, his face was tattooed, and he died at home. When the officials came to the door, she opened her eyes and frankly admitted, "I did it." "So what?" She sneered, turned around and jumped into the Chaobai River. Since then she had passed away. Until now, there was still an old man who lamented. She was really a unique woman. What a pity. After listening to the story pieced together by the old people around, Guillermo could not help but sigh. This Miss Shue's life was too rough. She met wolves and beasts. Her good life was ruined by men. That scholar was also too much. He did not protect her well. She obviously wanted to die when she broke off the engagement. Why didn't he stop her? There are no good men. Chapter 300. Ning Shu stared at him silently, her eyes slowly sweeping down from his chest. Guillermo covered his chest shyly, turned around and said, "I'm saying that those men are not good people. I'm a good person." No, I'm not a good person." "No, I'm a good person. My Shitsi is also a good person. Our Namping Prince's mansion is full of good men." Okay, I know. Your Namping Prince's mansions boys are the best." After teasing Guillermo, Ningxu began to talk seriously. "Xue Hongyi has already committed suicide, so this should be a copycat crime." "What do you mean?" "There are generally two kinds of copycat crimes. First, it's to pay homage. The murderer had a similar experience with a senior killer and developed empathy with him. Or he simply felt that this kind of killing method was very exciting, so he blindly worshipped him and regarded him as a spiritual role model. He couldn't help but imitate his behavior and killing method. Second, it's to frame. When the murderer committed the crime, in order to cover up the truth of his crime, he deliberately imitated a relatively famous modus operandi to divert the attention of the government and achieve the purpose of deceiving everyone. If that's the case, that Xue Hongyi has been dead for so many years, it's impossible to frame her. It should be the first kind." Ningxu was calm and composed. "Who said that it's impossible to frame her? If a living person can't be framed, then there are ghosts." Guillermo's little heart trembled again. But didn't you say that ghosts can't be trusted?" "Ghosts can't commit crimes, but it can't prevent people from having ghosts in their hearts." Ningxu raised her chin and motioned to the crowd that was gathering. Sure enough, not long after, someone in the crowd said seriously, 23 years ago, on the day she committed suicide, I was there. I heard with my own ears that Xue Hongyi said before she jumped into the river, 'If there are any evil men in the world, even if I have to climb up from the ground, I will kill all of them.' She must be the one who killed the envoy. Otherwise, how could they die exactly the same? A few days ago, I was chatting with Boss Qian of the tile house. She saw with her own eyes that the envoy flirted with a little girl who sold flowers, and almost jumped into the river to commit suicide. Maybe this stimulated Xue Hongyi, who died in Chaobai River, and summoned her ghost back. No wonder when I was packing up my stall last night, I vaguely saw a red flash across the Chaobai River. I thought I was old and my eyes were playing tricks on me. I didn't expect it to really be a ghost. Buddha bless, Buddha bless." The speed of gossip was always the fastest, especially when it was mixed with the mysterious and unfathomable theories of ghosts and gods. Not long after, the news of Xue Hongyi's return to kill spread throughout the entire Shi city. The sun at noon was really scorching. Looking at the crowd that was slowly dispersing, Ningxu whispered in Huema's ear, "You keep an eye on the man who blamed Xue Hongyi for the murder at the beginning, and I'll keep an eye on the weird old lady. I feel that one of them must have a problem." Guillermo nodded and followed him immediately. Ningxu stood in the shade of the tree and silently observed the dirty old lady for a long time. When the crowd had all dispersed, she finally stood up shakily and walked forward aimlessly with her back hunched. She continued to murmur. The nearby merchants and pedestrians seemed to know her. They either drove her away in disgust or kindly threw a copper coin or a steamed bun into her broken bowl. The old lady picked up the steamed bun and wolfed it down. Then she continued to walk forward, through one alley after another. Ningxu followed her for more than an hour, and found nothing wrong with her. When she was thinking about whether to go back or not, she suddenly found that she had inadvertently followed her into a deserted alley. Her heart skipped a beat and she stopped, but it was too late. The old lady suddenly turned her head and gave Ningxu a gloomy smile. She suddenly threw the broken bowl in her hand at Ningxu. "Go to hell." Chapter 301. It happened so suddenly that Ningxu only had time to kick the bowl and shatter it. In the next moment, a handful of silver needles dipped in poison flew towards her face. Ningxu didn't have any strength to defend herself. Seeing those poisonous needles were about to pierce her skin and take her life, an umbrella swept over and blocked those poisonous needles. Then the person who came swept a leg over and hit the old woman's heart. After that, the old woman flipped over and landed lightly. It was Zigui. Looking at the old woman who was seriously injured and stunned, Ningxu raised her eyebrows and smiled. I already guessed that someone would make a move on me while investigating this case. I didn't expect that you guys couldn't hold back after half a day. You guys haven't mastered the art of tolerance yet. Zigui, they took the initiative to come to us. How can we not accept it? Leave one alive to bring her back. Zigui took out a soft whip from his waist and replied, Yes. The old woman wiped the blood from her mouth and said in a hoarse voice, It was actually a man. You want to catch me? Let's see if you have the life to do so. A huge crossbow appeared on the top of the tree behind him. There was a short knife on the bowstring. With a bang, it flew towards Ningxu. Miss, be careful. Zigui immediately jumped in front of Ningxu. In an instant, blood bloomed on his shoulder. The strong poison quickly spread from the wound to his entire body. Zigui. Ningxu's pupils contracted. She supported Zigui and her face turned pale. The old woman sneered. Now there's no one to block for you. I originally listened to my master and wanted to keep you alive until you're 17 years old. I can't disobey my master's orders. Today, I can only break your 2 legs to play with. The crossbow in the distance was pulled taut again. With a soft sound, 2 knives shot out. Ningxu instinctively arched her body and protected the seriously injured Zigui in her arms. She closed her eyes tightly. She thought she was smart and used herself as bait. She didn't expect that she had a good plan. Others might not have a ladder to cross the wall. At that moment, there was a buzzing sound in her head. She didn't have any other thoughts. There were only 3 lonely words, Xiaoqing. She heard the sound of the 2 knives piercing through the air and flying towards her. His heart was almost paralyzed. In the next moment, 2 iron arrows flew from opposite directions. Ding! Ding! 2 sounds sent the dagger flying. Then the 3rd iron arrow pierced through the air and pierced the arm of the crossbowman hiding in the shade. The man disappeared with a whoosh, leaving a trail of blood on the green leaves. The old lady saw that something was wrong and quickly turned around. She was kicked by the young man who was chasing after her and fell flat on her face. Ningxu opened her eyes, still in shock. She saw a tanned young man with a bow in one hand and a quiver on his back. He was holding a bow in one hand and stepping on the back of the old lady with the other. He said cheerfully, You guys are also archers. I am also an archer. Why don't you compete with me to see which pot is better? You want me to break your legs and play with them? At the entrance of the alley, Jiuxi supported Xiaoqing and slowly appeared. When she saw the familiar figure, Ningxu was like a house cat that was bullied outside and finally found its master. Her heart was finally relieved. Her nose was still a little sour, and she looked at him with a pair of clear eyes. But the master had a cold face and didn't seem to welcome her at all. Jiuxi said, Xian, speak properly. Okay. I just miss my hometown language because I haven't spoken it for a long time. The young man called Xian turned his head and said, Speak. Which hole are you hiding in? And who is your master? My master is Tianyueyu, a phoenix among men. You guys are not qualified to hear his name. The old lady turned her head and smiled at Ningxu. She whispered in a sandpaper-like voice, Lady Ning, don't worry. There are still 4 months. I will wait for you in the netherworld. Xian quickly pinched his chin. Poisonous blood flowed out of the man's mouth. He was already dead. But the curse he uttered before he died lingered in Ningxu's heart like a haze and couldn't be dispelled for a long time. F***CKU. Xian searched for a long time, but didn't find anything useful. He threw the dirty and smelly body down and returned to Xiaoqing's side. Seeing the master and servants turn to leave without paying attention to her, Ningxu hurriedly said, Your Highness. What is it? Xiaoqing turned his head slightly and responded coldly. Ningxu supported Zigui and let him lean on her shoulder. Facing Xiaoqing, who was so cold and distant from her, she didn't know why, but she felt a sense of unease that she hadn't felt in a long time. My secret guard Zigui is seriously injured. The wound is poisonous. Your Highness, please save him. Xiaoqing snorted disdainfully. He turned his head and walked a long way before he proudly said, Take him away. Chapter 302. Ningxu's heart was finally at ease. She supported Zigui and struggled to walk to the carriage that was 100 steps away. Jiuxi glanced at Xiahou Qing's expression and turned back. Xian, you carry him. If the wound is pulled back and forth like this, the poison will spread faster. Xian immediately jumped away. I don't want to. Beautiful women are all tigers. Stay away from me. Jiuxi silently flew a dagger at him. Xian's shoulder touched and reluctantly moved over to carry the precious quiver in front of him. He bent down to carry Zigui on his back. As he walked, he sadly muttered, I touched a woman. I'm not clean anymore. I'm not clean anymore. In a half-conscious state, Zigui frowned and said with annoyance, You put me down. I'll walk by myself noisy. You dare to complain that I'm noisy? I didn't complain that you tainted my innocence. You ask me to put you down? I won't. I want to carry you. I want to carry you. Ningxu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Xiahou Qing was such an otherworldly person. Why did he raise so many weirdos around him? Huema was naive and naughty, Tianwen was gossipy, and Xian was like Sun Wukong. Only Jiuxi was normal. He was a copy of Xiahou Qing and could shock the other three. But this otherworldly person sat in the carriage with his jade-like face looking out of the window. Except for the few words just now, he didn't give her a single word, as if she didn't exist at all. Holding Zigui on her knees, Ningxu looked at him. Her heart was in turmoil for a long time before she carefully said, Thank you, Your Highness, for saving my daughter's life at the critical moment. As still as water. I saw those short knives. They were exactly the same as the ones that killed Wen Huinyang. The handles of the knives have the same threads. They were also shot with crossbows. This shows that the case of the envoy's sudden death was also manipulated by them. But I'm very curious. From Consort Nguyen to Consort Qi to the envoy, plus you and me, their targets are disorderly and seemingly unrelated. What is their purpose? Ningxu deliberately said a witty sentence. Could it be that they want to learn from Daji and bring disaster to the country? The 8 winds did not move. Your Highness, are you angry with my daughter? He was still speechless. Ningxu closed her mouth. Her heart felt empty, so she copied him and looked out the window. She watched the camphor trees cast their shade one after another, and the walls of the houses in the alley were covered with green usneas. She felt the rare quiet coolness in the alley. After a long time, she lowered her head and let out a soft laugh. Hearing her laughter, Xiahou Qing finally showed a trace of emotion. He mocked. What are you laughing at? You're finally able to get married before you're 17. Are you happy? No, Ningxu silently shook her head. I'm laughing. It seems that every time I'm in danger and call out Your Highness' name in my heart, Your Highness will always appear and save my life. It was the same when the Empress wanted to kill me in the Phoenix Algae Palace. It was the same when the venomous bees were wreaking havoc in the Xianqing Monastery. It was the same today. So I feel that it's interesting. Your Highness really is my savior. She didn't know if it was because he was flattered by her savior, or because the word no smoothed his hair, but the ice on Xiahou Qing's face melted a little. But his tone was still distant. It was just a coincidence. Don't flatter yourself. It was such a remote alley. It wasn't on the way, and there were no restaurants or markets. How could it be so coincidental? Of course, Ningxu didn't have the guts to ask. She only dared to snicker. Her eyes curved, and there were thousands of fragments of stars in her eyes. Chapter 303. She thought for a bit and then said, Your Highness heard it at the Supreme Court this morning, right? So when I chased after the carriage, Your Highness didn't stop. Is it because you're angry? Hearing her mention the morning, Xiahou Qing frowned and continued to be cold. That's your own business. Who you're going to marry, and who you're going to marry has nothing to do with me. Why would I be angry? Ningxu took a deep breath and gathered her courage to seriously look at him. Her clear eyes reflected Xiahou Qing's shadow and nothing else. If I said that this marriage was not what I wanted, would Your Highness believe me? After experiencing the betrayal of her first life, 300 years, 7 lives and 7 deaths, it had become a habit for her to face death alone. Every time death came, she would chew up the pain, fear, and despair bit by bit and swallow it into her stomach. She would never talk to anyone about it. Other than herself, she didn't expect anyone, didn't rely on anyone, and didn't believe in anyone. Later, even when she faced the pain of being cut to pieces and begging for death, she was only left with numbness. In any case, no one would come to save her. She was destined to die miserably. But in this life, her fate was restarted. Her lost family was found and her flesh and blood returned to her side. Then she met him. She seemed to have been born with a weak personality. When she was sick, there was someone to act spoiled. When she made a mistake, she would be forgiven. When she was in danger, she suddenly had a trace of luck. Thinking what if he was willing to save her. Then he really did appear, again and again. It gave her a chance to live and ignited a long-lost hope. There was indeed a deal between them. A cooperation, that's right. But gradually, outside of the deal, the place on the left side of her chest that was constantly beating could clearly feel that something was different. In the past, she didn't care who she married or what kind of face she would spend the rest of her life with. In any case, she just needed to guard her heart and not move it. Now she cared. She didn't want him to die. She didn't want him to misunderstand. She didn't want him to be disappointed. She didn't want any of these things, so this morning, she subconsciously chased after him so far, wanting to explain it clearly to him. Long before she had thought it through, her instincts had already made the decision for her. It would be foolish to continue deceiving oneself and others. Ningxu was not the sloppy type. Feeling the seriousness in Ningxu's voice, Xia Hoqing finally turned his head. His face, which was as beautiful as the first snow, revealed a touch of gentleness, which spread like ink. Then what's your plan? Ningxu's face unconsciously burned. She hurriedly said, in short, I will find a way to cancel this marriage as soon as possible. After that, I will work even harder to catch the mastermind behind the scenes with your highness. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly as he slowly said, all right. Ningxu also laughed, her face burning even more. He had only said one word. Why was she so nervous? Where was her pride? In order to prevent him from discovering such a shameful thing, she quickly pressed her palms to her face to cool it down. But when she held her face, her heart beat even faster. Before catching that person, neither of them could promise the other. He couldn't promise that he wouldn't die from the poison at any time, and she couldn't promise that the tragedy wouldn't happen again. Her family would be safe and she would be safe and sound. This seemed to be a difficult knot to untie. The only way was to catch the rat hiding in the gutter. It had to be. Chapter 304. I knew it. I knew it. How could anyone escape from my eyes? It turned out that the real person's skin was peeled off and then dressed up. No wonder even I couldn't see through it. Oh, so disgusting. Huiyamo squatted on the ground and peeled off the skin of the old lady. He was so disgusted that he stuck out his tongue. That piece of human skin was thrown to the ground by Huiyamo. Ningxu moved aside in disgust and asked, who is the old woman who was killed? Tianwen was a qualified gossiper. He immediately said, I just asked around. Her name is Baizhu. She used to be Xue Hongyi's maid more than 20 years ago. After Xue Hongyi committed suicide, she also became crazy. She has been begging around the West Market for a living. Everyone said that she was scared to death by Xue Hongyi's murderous look. Ningxu snorted. She took out a person who had been dead for more than 20 years to cover up her murder. That's a painstaking effort. However, the person was already dead. Even if they wanted to ask, they couldn't find anything. Not long after, the two corpses, one real and one fake, were dragged away by the people from the Dali temple. Tianwen was responsible for collecting information. It was inconvenient for him to show up for too long, so he said goodbye and disappeared. Now, except for the half footprint and the embroidery needle, there was no evidence at all. As for the footprint, Ningxu gave it to the officials of the Dali temple to compare one by one. None of the people who stayed on the third floor last night matched. After the procuress brought Susu here, she talked for a long time. She swore that it was absolutely not them who did it, and it was absolutely not the people in their building who did it. Her expression was so sincere that she almost pointed to the sky and cried out for injustice. "My lord, you're just and honorable. We are so innocent. People like us who roll around in the pleasure field are the most lowly people in the world. We do the most despised business and earn the most bitter money. We deal with all kinds of customers every day, who would want to smash their own bowl of rice. Let's take Susu as an example. Her crippled father and sick mother depend on her to survive every day. If the envoy is killed, her whole family will die. There are many families in the brothel that are worse off than her family. We really didn't kill the envoy." The brothel keeper's tears and snot flowed down her face. Ningshu said, "I heard that the envoy especially likes to hang around Xuanfang stage. Every 3 to 5 days he would visit once. Moreover, he has a bad temper and has humiliated many girls during this period. Is this true?" The brothel keeper smiled bitterly and said, "Ioyo misses taking us too seriously. We are in the flesh business. When the customers see us happy, they treat us like pets and play with us. When they are unhappy, beating, scolding, and whipping are all light punishments. How can we not wake up by ourselves? What kind of humiliation had he not suffered? How could he kill someone just because of this? How many prostitutes could learn from Xue Hongyi, who would rather die than live in dishonor? She was one of a kind. As for the enmity, it is even more impossible. The envoy has only been in the capital for a short period of time. The girls didn't even recognize him before." Miss Susu's eyes were swollen from crying. She nodded repeatedly. "Miss, although I was slapped by the envoy, I definitely wouldn't kill him over such a small matter. I definitely don't have the guts to do so." Ningshu's thoughts were a bit messed up by the crying. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she coaxed this delicate beauty. She felt extremely tired. After Susu stopped crying, Ningshu's expression changed. "From what mother said just now, you know Xue Hongyi?" Hearing Ningshu's question, the brothel keeper was silent. She tidied up the messy hair on her temples and sighed. "I know her. How could I not know her? After more than 20 years, I almost forgot about her. If it wasn't for the envoy's death, I really wouldn't have remembered her. At that time, she and I were both working in 100 Flowers Tower. In terms of qualifications, I was her senior. Before she came, I was the top hostess in 100 Flowers Tower. When she came, she stole my limelight. That arrogance of hers was really annoying at first. Who knew that such a person would end up like that?" Chapter 305. Ningshu pretended to be curious. "I heard that before Xue Hongyi committed suicide, she used her life to curse. If there is another evil man in the world, even if I have to crawl up from the ground, I will kill all of them. Is there such a thing?" The procuress snorted. "Who said that? On the day of her death, there were only a few people around. I heard that the officers were going to catch her, so I quickly went to find her. Miss, please understand that she committed a murder. I had no intention of persuading her to run away. It's just that, it's not worth it to lose her life for that scum. But when I arrived, it was already too late. She was already standing at the side of Chaobai River, surrounded by officials. Her eyes kept looking around. I knew that she was waiting for the scholar that she pledged her life to, but he didn't come in the end. Xue Hongyi smiled and jumped into the river. I was the one who identified the corpse. She was beautiful when she was alive, but ugly when she died. After soaking in the water for a night, her whole body swelled up. Really, the corpse was collected for her by us sisters. That stinky scholar was like a dead person from the beginning to the end. He didn't even show his face once. In my opinion, Xue Hongyi was always carefree and unrestrained, but she was blind when it came to men." Ningshu nodded with a sigh. Most of the time, this saying was true. Most of the time, people who were righteous tended to be dog butchers while those who were heartless tended to be scholars. However, Xue Hongyi died early, so it was useless to dwell on this matter. Thus Ningshu said, "There is one more thing that I want to ask Mother. I checked the layout of the Search Fong Terrace this morning. The east, west, and west sides of the first floor have one main door, 2 side doors, and 12 windows. Every door is guarded by people, is that right?" "That's right. It's to prevent customers from running away after enjoying themselves. After all, there are too many people here. Besides these, is there any other entrance or exit? Or any other way to enter the building? The procuress lowered her head and her eyes flashed. She seemed to be thinking carefully. No, there shouldn't be. I heard from the wash opera that there are some experts who can jump 3 feet high and have the ability to leap over roofs and vault over walls. Could it be that the murderer used this method to sneak in? Otherwise, I have dozens of hired thugs here. How could none of them be watched? That must be it. That's right, that's right. I've also heard of people who know how to hit acupoints. They hit the acupoints and when they wake up, they won't be able to remember anything. Miss, hurry up and check it out. The more she talked, the more mysterious she became. Ning Shu was really good at explaining to her that the things in the play were exaggerated and not real. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so she waved her hand and asked the people of the Supreme Court to take them back. Before leaving, Ning Shu asked Su Su, I heard that Miss Su Su hasn't been feeling well recently. You even asked someone to buy a jade hairpin flower. Is that true? Su Su's face turned red. She clenched her fingers and said with difficulty, Yes. In my line of work, I often suffer from some minor illnesses related to that. For the past 2 months, I haven't had a period, and I also need to relieve myself. I heard from the sisters in the building that if you take a mixture of jade hairpin flower, snakeskin, and lilac, and wash it, it will be effective. So I asked Miss Ear, who sells flowers in Shui City, to buy some. Then do you remember what day of the month Miss Ear came? Su Su's eyelashes trembled. The 7th day of the 5th month. The envoy came to see me that day. I really couldn't wait on him, so he left unhappily. That's why I remember. After that, did the envoy ever mention to you what happened that night? Su Su shook her head. No, the envoy always comes here to have fun. He never chats with us. A woman was worth 500 ducks, and the ones in the brothel were worth 1,000. Ning Shu rubbed her temples and continued to walk slowly in the building. She was deep in thought. Xia Hoqing had already found out the details of the young masters who stayed on the 3rd floor last night. So far, he hadn't found any motive to kill them. Although the envoy had a bad temper, he was generous. Young Master Tan often paid for him, so the girls in the building didn't have a strong motive. Thinking of this name in her heart, Ning Shu couldn't help but sigh. She really didn't want to involve the girl who was humiliated and suffered so much for no reason in this case. However, now many clues were pointing to her. Moreover, she had a similar experience with Xue Hongyi, so she did have a motive to imitate the crime. It seemed that she had no choice but to find her. Chapter 306. Ning Shu and Huema immediately got on the horse under the warm sun and rode in the direction of Ear's house. When they reached the entrance of the alley, their backs were soaked with sweat. They didn't expect to find nothing. The woman who was washing at the door said, You are late. If you came earlier yesterday, you might have seen them. Yesterday at noon, the family of 3 had packed up and went back to their hometown. Ning Shu and Huema looked at each other and asked, Went back to their hometown? Why did they suddenly leave the capital? The woman said with relish, She can't stay here any longer. Ever since Ear's accident, everyone in the neighborhood knows about it. Don't mention how unpleasant the words are behind Ear's back. Ear's mother wants to protect her daughter, so she can only take her back to her hometown. In my opinion, even if they go back, they can't pretend that it didn't happen. A girl's innocence is the most important thing. When she gets married in the future, will her husband not notice it? Ear's life is ruined. After the woman finished chatting, she looked at them with vigilance. Who are you two? Why do you want to know about her family? Ning Shu clapped her hands and sighed. We're from Sanlikyo Jewelry Shop. Her family had ordered a few pieces of jewelry from our shop, saying that they were preparing for their wedding. Originally, we agreed to pay the deposit first, and they would pay the rest when the jewelry was ready. But several days have passed since the agreed day to pick up the jewelry, and we haven't seen them. The boss was very anxious, so he asked us to hurry them. You see, this jewelry was originally ordered for each person. It took a lot of effort to finish it. But her family suddenly doesn't want it. Who do you want us to sell it to? Don't you think it makes sense? The woman nodded. That's right. But Ear's father and mother are honest people. They didn't do it on purpose. I'm afraid that they were confused by the recent events, so they forgot about it. But even if they remember, the marriage has been cancelled, so there is no place to use the jewelry. Ning Shu said vividly. Whether they want it or not, they have to give us a definite answer. We rely on our reputation to do business. If they don't want it, we can just melt the jewelry and make a new style for them. Does elder sister know where their hometown is? My shop has a few branches. Maybe I can find her place. This. The woman rolled her eyes, obviously hiding something. Ning Shu understood and took out a few copper coins from her bosom. Good sister, then tell me. I just started working in the shop a few days ago. This is the first task the boss gave me. If I don't do it well, the boss will definitely scold me to death. The woman hurriedly put the 5 copper coins into her pocket and said with a smile, Oh, my sister can't see people suffering. Let me think. I heard about it when I was chatting with Ear's mother. Her hometown is in Chong County. It's less than 30 miles away from the capital. Ning Shu said sweetly. Thank you, elder sister. Ning Shu walked out of the alley and took the tied horse away. She touched her forehead and found that it was full of sweat. Hui Mo said dejectedly, It's such a hot day. I came here for nothing. It's so hot. He used his hand as a fan and fanned himself a few times, but he didn't feel cold. He saw that there was a shop selling lotus leaves on the side of the road, so he quickly ran to buy 2. He gave one to Ning Shu and put the other on his head. Then he felt better. He said, But does this mean that we are wrong? Her family left the capital at noon yesterday. The envoy died at night. They didn't have time to commit the crime. Maybe this is just a coincidence. It has nothing to do with her family. Chapter 307. Ning Shu fanned herself with a green lotus leaf and exhaled a mouthful of hot air. It's just a suspicion. No one can convict her directly before we find the key evidence. But don't you think that they left the capital at the right time? I remember that the last time I met them here was 3 days ago. At that time, Ear couldn't stand it anymore and wanted to commit suicide by jumping into the river. Why didn't she leave that day or the next day? Why didn't she leave until yesterday at noon? After a few hours, the envoy was killed. If the evidence is too good, people will have no choice but to have more doubts. Hui Mo nodded and said, Yeah, I just walked around her house. She doesn't look rich. She doesn't need to spend 2 days to pack up and go back to her hometown. So there must be something wrong with her family. Let's go and find her. Don't worry. I will ask for Scythia to bring people to find her family. As for us, let's go back to Xuanfang Station first. Hui Mo's face fell. Why are we going there again? We have almost dug 3 feet into the ground. Don't you think it's enough? No matter who killed the envoy, according to the analysis of the crime scene, the envoy was stabbed 8 times, and each stab caused a large amount of blood to splash out. It must have sprayed onto the murderer. The murderer could have thrown the blood-stained clothes and shoes into the river to destroy the evidence, but the blood on his hands and face would have taken time to clean up. Last night, there were not many people on the 3rd floor, but there were not many. In order to avoid being seen, he had to find a place to hide. I have searched all the rooms on the 3rd floor, but I couldn't find this place. So, we have to search again. Ning Shu stepped on the stirrups and jumped up. She raised her eyebrows. Are you going or not? Hui Mo remembered Shizi's order. He said that if anything happened to Lady Ning, he would be responsible for it. He had to say with annoyance, I'll go. I'll go. What could he do? He was just a weak and helpless little boy. He had no human rights. Ning Shu searched the entire 3rd floor once again. She even knelt on the ground and knocked on every piece of the floor. She did not even let go of the screen and the wardrobe. Not to mention a drop of blood. There was not even a trace of the smell of blood. Hui Mo crawls out from under the bed. His face is covered with soot. He heaves a long sigh. Ning Shu looked at his pitiful appearance and laughed. Don't sigh. Go and eat something first. Don't you want to eat roast mutton? Let's go. Mo immediately stood up and said energetically, "Let's go." The sky was already completely dark. Gradually, several lanterns were lit up in the West Market. The specks of light reflected into the river, making both sides of the Chaobai River look like a dream. Unfortunately, due to the influence of the envoy's murder case, Shi City was no longer as lively as it used to be. Among them, Dong Laishan, which was opposite Xuanfang stage, was the first to bear the brunt. Usually, at this time of the meal, there should be a lot of guests. It was not an exaggeration to say that Dong Laishan was deserted today. No matter how hard he tried to attract guests, it was useless. The boss was so irritable that his face turned black. He pushed the waiter aside and scolded him. "You're really not good at running errands. You're the best at being lazy and pretending to be dead. After so long, you still haven't attracted a single guest. Why did I hire you in the first place? You're just a useless snack. Go away." Only when he saw Ning Shuhui coming over did the boss let him go. He hurriedly put on a smile and went up to greet them. "Two distinguished guests, please come in. Order whatever you want to eat. We have everything here, especially the roasted mutton. Do you want to order 2 plates? You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.